observers to shake their heads at overeager investors so desperate for yield that they're willing to give up typical safeguards. Obviously, we're well past the point of scolding now. It's still early days in the COVID-19 shakeout, but struggling companies are starting to pile up. It's hard to see what breaks this downward spiral. To make matters more challenging, says Evan Friedman, head of covenant research at Moody's, having looser covenants takes that seat at the table away and lets the company manage its way through its distress. In other words, investors have little choice but to let companies take the wheel. For now, they're just along for the ride. I'm Brian Chapata. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
And you can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. 6:38 on Wall Street, and it's time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Bob Moon.
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has granted permission for genetically engineered mosquitoes to be released into the Florida Keys and around Houston to see if they can help limit the spread of mosquito-borne illnesses. The British biotech company Oxitec Limited was granted an experimental use permit to release a genetically engineered type of mosquito species known to be associated with the Zika virus and viruses that cause yellow fever. Besides the EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution, Oxitec must get state and local approval before it can start field testing. But if granted, testing will take place over a 2-year period in Monroe County, Florida, starting this summer, and in Harris County, Texas, beginning in 2021. When genetically engineered males are released into the field, they mate with wild female mosquitoes. With only male mosquitoes able to survive, the population decreases as the gene spreads. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
All right, thank you, Bob. Now some other stories we're following this morning. Neiman Marcus is nearing a bankruptcy plan that could see the company change hands. Sources tell us the department store is closing in on a deal with PIMCO and other lenders that would give the group control of the company. In exchange, the deal would cut Neiman's debt in half while the company restructures in Chapter 11. Hertz is preparing to file for bankruptcy. That's if the rental car company fails to rework its debt and can't get lenders to extend a grace period. A Chapter 11 filing would let Hertz stay in business while working out a payment plan. Travel restrictions have killed off much of that company's business. And United Airlines is cutting at least 30% of its managerial and administrative jobs. The reduction of about 3,500 positions will take effect in October as the airline prepares for a prolonged travel slump. In addition, management and administrative employees will be forced to take 20 days off without pay this year. Futures pointing to a higher open this morning on Wall Street. S&P futures up 26 points. Dow futures up 238. NASDAQ futures a gain of 90 points. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look. the football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick. The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Blagging your way through the kids' schoolwork, pretending you always knew the capital of Brunei is Bandar Seri Begawan, when really you're frantically scrolling through the internet with your phone under the table, hoping that they just think you're an absolute fountain of knowledge. Whatever you rely on the internet for, rely on TalkTalk to stay connected. TalkTalk for everyone.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby, and after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our After Show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air, and they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, coronavirus update. New models project death tolls could nearly double previous estimates.
With more states relaxing restrictions, two troubling forecasts. New Trump administration projections seen in an internal document first obtained by the New York Times forecast up to 3,000 deaths per day by June 1st. And University of Washington researchers now project 134,000 U.S. deaths by August, almost double their previous estimate. Dr. Chris Murray of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation.
The big driver here of the big change is that we're taking into account the states that are relaxing social distancing.
The global coronavirus death toll passed 250,000 Monday per the Johns Hopkins University. Karen Kefa, Washington.
The Senate is in session today to consider the nomination of John Ratcliffe to the post of Director of National Intelligence. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
Is that good for American finance? What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by Portfolio Analysts, powered by Interactive Brokers. Savvy investors use Portfolio Analysts to create a consolidated view of their finances and check the health of their complete financial portfolio. Sign up for free at PortfolioAnalyst.com. We are watching some earnings crossing the Bloomberg. We're hearing from Marathon Petroleum. They reported a first quarter loss that was wider than analysts were looking for. That loss per share was $14.25. Analysts were looking for a loss of 29 cents a share, just to give you an idea of how big that loss was. Revenue also missing analyst estimates, and Marathon Petroleum saying the timing could change for the Speedway separation. DuPont reported earnings that beat analyst estimates. Futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 26 points. Dow futures up 231. NASDAQ futures up 87. The DAX in Germany is up 1.3%. 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up 9.7%, up $1.97 at $22.33 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.4% or $7.60 at $17.0570 an ounce. The euro 1.0843 against the dollar. British pound 1.2455 and the yen at 106.76. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Karen. A White House memo to congressional committees says no member of the Trump administration's coronavirus task force may agree to testify on Capitol Hill unless the appearance is expressly approved by the president's chief of staff. Democrats are bristling at the restriction on gathering information about the nation's response to the pandemic. The memo follows a White House move to block Dr. Anthony Fauci from testifying before a House panel. A generic pill used to treat ulcers, acid reflux, and heartburn has been added to the FDA's list of drug shortages just over a week after a report that famotidine was being tested in high doses as a potential treatment for COVID-19 patients. A Senate panel is set to consider Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe's nomination to be Director of National Intelligence. Ratcliffe was unexpectedly renominated by President Trump in February after his name was withdrawn last summer because of complaints that he was not qualified for the job. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it's 6:49 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in the nation's capital include an internal government document estimating a surge in coronavirus deaths of maybe 2,500 a day by June. The White House is discounting that document. The Senate saying it can't release personnel records after a former aide accused Joe Biden of sexual assault in the 90s. And it's not just John Ratcliffe. President Trump's pick to be watchdog for the coronavirus stimulus package faces a Senate confirmation hearing today. Also making news this morning, the president set to visit a Honeywell mask production facility in Phoenix, Arizona, as his reelection campaign shifts its message from the coronavirus response to the economic recovery. Joining us now, Wendy Schiller, political science chair at Brown University. And we are starting to see evidence of this shift already, Wendy, in messaging from the president, starting to see it in some campaign ads. How badly has the president been hurt politically by the response to the pandemic itself? And is this shift the right move?
Well, I mean, I think voters are looking for some semblance of a return to normal, and they understand that the way we live will be different, but they're looking for some signs that the economy can recover. And the problem for the president is that two things. One is the virus itself, hurting people, killing people, makes it very difficult for us to move forward economically, but fear, right? So that when voters have fear and they don't go to the store, they don't go to the restaurants, and they don't do all the other things, they don't fly, the economy can't get back on its feet. And so without confidence in the president and the response to the pandemic, he can't get what he needs for the economic response.
Now, we might be seeing evidence of that fear just this morning with a new poll out from the Washington Post and the University of Maryland. It seems to indicate that Americans broadly oppose reopenings of restaurants and retail stores, even as the president seems to be pushing for that.
Well, they're going to vote, quote unquote, with their feet, right? So this is the problem for all of us. And there's so many people who have been hurt. There are so many people who don't have a job anymore. And we don't know if that job comes back 6 months from now or ever. And that is something that we all, even if we are fearful, still have to think about in terms of how we get back to where we need to be. So the president should be balancing, the coronavirus and the economy. I think not allowing people to testify before the House is really, really bad. I think, again, those independent suburban voters that he needs in the very key states that are swing, they aren't going to react well to that. They're going to go, why aren't you going to have them testify? We want to know what you're doing, and we want to know why you're doing it.
Well, it seems as though the message from the president is that he's the figure that you can trust to rebuild the economy to the level it was before the pandemic, as opposed to Joe Biden. Is that the right message to put forward here? And can Biden counter that in some way?
Well, I mean, Trump's got the advantage that Biden just still hasn't seemed to come out of his basement. And I keep saying this, but it doesn't seem to change. And people are saying, oh, he's here, he's there. He's not really a force to counter the president right now. So the president has open season on what we call the bully pulpit. He can shape the message. But the problem for him is if you tie yourself to the economic recovery and it doesn't happen, and then you tie yourself to the pandemic response, which is worse than it was supposed to be, you don't have anything to go to bat for when you're running for re-election. So he's going to go with the economy, because in the states that like him, that he's done well in, the economy is better than the states that don't vote for him. This is geographically concentrated at the moment, and he's going to go and shore up his base. And that is a smart thing to do from now until about September. Shore up the votes you need. And states like Kansas, states like Arizona are all of a sudden in play now. That's unusual. North Carolina is more competitive. And he's got to worry about keeping those states, much less winning those swing states again.
I also want to get your reaction in our last 30 seconds here to a New York Post interview that was just published this morning with the president, saying that he thinks state bailouts are unfair to Republicans because, as he puts it, all the states that need help are run by Democrats. Is the president over-politicizing state aid?
Every president politicizes state aid, so I can't say that he's overdoing it. I can say that this is one of the big problems with the Electoral College winner-take-all. If we had proportional representation and every president had to be competitive in every state because they got a proportion of the Electoral College votes to their votes, then you would not have presidents able to dismiss particular states in parts of the country.
All right, Wendy Schiller, always good getting your insights. Thank you so much. Wendy Schiller is chair of the Political Science Department at Brown University. Karen.
Thanks, Nathan. 6:54 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report with John Tucker. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Small business has been hit hard by the stay-at-home orders across the country. Some mom-and-pop firms started feeling the pain even before the pandemic took hold in the U.S. As a Chinese food brand, Mr. Bing was an early casualty of COVID-19. Brian Goldberg, who runs the company, owns the company with restaurants that include 39 employees. Brian, tell us your experience, how it affected the business.
We were already having some issues, honestly, some challenges in terms of being able to cover our overhead, but we did start to see a sales decline in December, and then further in January and February when we checked with our neighbors in the food hall that were not Chinese or Asian food concepts. They were doing just fine. And then we started to hear news stories that Chinese and Asian restaurants were starting to see a bit of a sales decline and start to suffer, and also see even a bit of racism happening from the Wuhan COVID situation. There was starting to be a bit of an unfounded stigma against Chinese food, Chinese restaurants, that if you go there, you have a greater chance of potentially getting this virus that was only really in China at the time. Now, that's not the only reason. We ended up closing in February. We were having other challenges, honestly, with cash flow, but it definitely didn't help.
So the brick and mortar business is gone, but have you been able to pivot at all to transform the business?
We started working with Whole Foods to potentially open a Mr. Bing cart or a kiosk in their prepared food section. And they required us to tweak some of our ingredients to comply with Whole Foods standards. And one of those things was our chili crisp that we had been using for 7 years, the Godmother sauce from China, Lao Gama. It's that kind of red and yellow crispy chili. So they said, can you make your own version of that without MSG? And we said, sure. So hired a chef who specialized in sustainability, helped kind of reverse engineer that stuff and tweak it. So we used mushroom powder instead of MSG, and no preservatives. We made it gluten-free, vegan. When Whole Foods tasted it, they loved it, and they encouraged us to pursue that.
Yeah, and I understand you're selling that online now, and that also some grocery chains are also expressing an interest in the frozen version of your Chinese crepes, the Bings. Hopefully that's going to help business. Brian Goldberg, owner of the Mr. Bing Chinese brand, thanks for speaking with us. And we're going to continue bringing you stories of small business struggling in the face of the coronavirus pandemic every day at this time, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's the Bloomberg Small Business Report. Karen.
John, you keep bringing me these food stories. I'm going to have to bring bigger breakfasts from now on.
This is true.
All right, John, thank you. It is 6:57 on Wall Street. And again, we are watching Marathon Petroleum. It took a charge of $12.4 billion in the first quarter on non-cash impairments as America's biggest fuel maker adjusts to severely lower demand for its product in the wake of a global pandemic. Marathon said it will slash its own spending by 30% to $3 billion for the year. We'll be watching those shares as the morning continues. Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversation.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
Somebody has a stroke every 5 minutes in the UK. With time, though, courage, and the right support, lives can be rebuilt. Mine was. But with this current crisis, I can't imagine how much harder it must be for the stroke survivor and their family, more isolated and alone than ever. The Stroke Association is working tirelessly to support the NHS and develop new ways to rebuild lives. To find out more or to donate, search Stroke Association now.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
The data.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be. The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days.
It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, states moving towards easing lockdowns, Germany's top court taking on the ECB's bond buying program, and high-profile bankruptcies in America beginning to pile up. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Tuesday. Here is your Tuesday morning price action. After grinding out a day of gains in yesterday's session, we add some weight to that. Equity futures up 31 on the S&P 500, positive around about 1.1%. In the bond market, we have just had a ton of issuance in the credit space and investment grade in America, starting to infect treasuries just a little bit. Yields higher, up by 3 basis points on a 10-year, 0.66% is your 10-year yield this morning. Outside of that, in foreign exchange, only one currency pair to watch this morning. Euro, dollar, euro weaker, down 0.7% off the back of that battle between Germany's top court and the ECB. A little bit more on that a little bit later. Alongside me, Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Farrow, together with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. And Tom, we have to begin. California slowly easing the lockdown, and New York could just be a couple of weeks behind.
Yeah, California's a real symbol there, and I'll agree, John, it's worldwide. There's still some huge issues out there. I'd lead with Brazil, but certainly the way the market came back yesterday was beneficial for the bulls, and you see it with a VIX through 35 today, down to a 34 handle. There's a really constructive feel to the tape this morning.
That's the good news. Progress, in a word. Progress. Yeah. Over in Europe, I can't say we've made progress. Lisa, this strange battle between Germany's top court and the ECB, which has been going on now for the best part of a decade, continues.
This is such a confusing ruling on many levels because it doesn't really have necessarily any impact on the ECB's emergency lending program or bond purchasing program that it just unveiled. But it does raise a challenge for some of the consideration that the Bundesbank made or didn't challenge perhaps back in 2015. I think going forward, the takeaway that I'm getting from analysis here is just that it will give people more justification to challenge the programs and just perhaps, I don't know, edify Euroscepticism?
It's legal, but is it proportional? And now the ECB is going to have to come back and say that it is proportionate and have a whole study maybe. The good news is that we actually have a lawyer, Tom, running the European Central Bank. It's probably a good time to have a lawyer running the ECB.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I mean, the Madame Lagarde response here is very important. But what I'd also want to see here is the political response from Germany. There were some images over the night, I mean, the last 24 hours of German shopping, German retail opening. And, again, it's getting beyond the horrific news that we've seen. And there's a very constructive feel on that worldwide.
Let's bring in our first guest of the morning, shall we? Gershon Distenfeld of AB, the co-head of Fixed Income. Gershon, always great to catch up with you, sir. Do you take any optimism away from the news in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, look, I think that this is all good, but we have to remember markets are pricing this all in, right? Markets price things ahead of the actual news. So it's good to see this, but this has to continue. If it doesn't continue, then markets have been way too optimistic. We have to see, again, we've seen this, we've seen the monetary response, positive. We've seen the fiscal response, positive. This now all has to work. It has to bridge us to getting back to an economy that is functioning. And we still have a long way to go.
Where is the opportunity in fixed income? I mean, just as a general statement, where is that opportunity right now?
So I'd say broadly the opportunity is in credit. But even, I think at the open, one of you mentioned we're seeing a lot of defaults. There's going to be a very high default rate in the credit space. I think the market got a little bit over its skis a few weeks ago when the Fed came out and said they're going to start buying high yield. They're not buying indiscriminately. They're going to buy some fallen angels. They might buy some ETFs, but they're letting companies go bankrupt. They're not going to save any company that would have gone bankrupt absent the crisis. They're letting these E&P companies go that had no prayer of surviving even at $40 oil, right? They're letting a company like Hertz go.
Right,
Sorry,
Gershon. No, I mean, exactly to that point. That's exactly where I wanted to go. And as you said, there are a growing number of insolvencies, not just in the energy space. Hertz expected to file any minute. Neiman Marcus is close to a bankruptcy deal. J. Crew filed for bankruptcy. Gold's Gym filed. New York Sports Club evidently is close to filing. At what point do we hit some sort of threshold, a tipping point of sorts, where these bankruptcies start to rope in perhaps steadier, sturdier companies and get them into trouble as well?
Well, I don't know if it's a rope in. I mean, the market still is very open to companies that have runway. One of the advantages of advantage might be the wrong word, but one of the consequences of a long time period before this crisis of both low rates, tight spreads, and hot markets is that companies were able to refinance maturities that they had coming due. So they have a runway. So companies that aren't in that don't have debt refinancing in the next few years, which there are many, they have a long runway here. So even if they have a period where their revenues are impacted dramatically, as long as they have enough cash flow to service debt, they don't have anything that's going to force them into a liquidity event over the next few years. So we see a very bifurcated market now. We talk about average spreads in the 700 to 800 range. It really misstates things because there are companies that are fine, and then there are a lot of companies that are priced as if they're going to default. But I didn't answer the main question you had. Where's the opportunity in fixed income? It's actually outside of the corporate space. There's opportunities in emerging market debt. Some of the oil importers that benefit from lower oil prices are very interesting here, and the securitized space. A lot of the housing-related opportunities, both residential and commercial, have gotten beaten up way more than the corporate space. And some of the dynamics there mean there's going to be less ultimate losses there than in the corporate space. Not something a lot of investors are paying attention to.
Well, let's think about EM then, some of the big energy importers. People might think, first of all, of a country like India. Talk to me about EM, Gershon. India, Turkey, elsewhere as well.
Well, Well, look, it is very, very country specific. In the early part of the crisis, some of, everything got tainted. Certainly some of the big oil exporters got hit a lot more. Certainly some of the smaller ones, the Ecuadors, the Angolas. But you look at, the Central America, Caribbean region, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Honduras, Jamaica, those got hit pretty hard. They've started to come back a little bit, but still a lot of opportunity there. Anything with any type of oil exposure got hit, and there wasn't a lot of differentiation. Even some of the big exporters that have reserves up to wazoo that could withstand many years of lower oil prices. So there's some opportunity there. One of the things, people, when they think about high returns and income and fixed income, they think right to the U.S. high yield market. There's a much bigger market out there.
Did you load the boat yesterday on Apple? I mean, does somebody call you up and say, I got a ton of Apple here, new issuance? How much did you buy yesterday?
Yeah, we did not participate in that issue.
Why not?
Why not? I don't know. It's not. We don't typically load up on any one deal anyway. And the market was very, very goggle over it.
Yeah. That's
that our space.
I didn't mean no disrespect for your individual issuance ideas. We don't want to know those, but you went right to it. I mean, it's a gaga offering, isn't it? Is that a trap out there for our listeners? All the gaga offerings and bonds?
Well, I think one has to be judicious around these things. Typically speaking, companies that are able to offer, they do, and you have to distinguish between. You can't get caught up in the moment when it comes to bonds. When it comes to bonds, you're not thinking. Remember, people tend to think about it in an equity lens. You're not thinking about, do I buy a bond because the next quarter's earnings are going to be good, or what do I think of the next 12 months? You're thinking about, do I want to lend the company money for the long term? Look, in the case of Apple, I don't think there's much doubt you're going to get your money back at the end of the day. The question is, is how is this relative to other things I could be buying? How does it fit into my portfolio?
Gershon, just to pick up on Tom's point, there has been this record surge of investment-grade bond issuance in particular, and there's been some concern that this is just weakening balance sheets, adding leverage at a time of weakening economic growth. And I'm wondering how you think about that. I know you specialize more in the high-yield space, but on a broader level, do you feel like investment-grade is sort of deteriorating in credit quality faster than perhaps people are recognizing?
Well, look, I think it has been the case for a while. We've been talking for 3 years about how we're later in the cycle. We're seeing leverage creep up. We've been expecting the market has been expecting a tremendous amount of fallen angel volumes, all kinds of concern around that. An interesting stat that we looked at recently was, I think this might surprise people. People were expecting perhaps hundreds of billions of dollars of downgrades in the next couple of years. The average amount of debt downgraded from investment grade to high yield during the boom years from 2010 through 2018 was $72 billion a year. So it's important to note that there's a lot of credit migration even in the good times. Are we going to see a little bit more of it now? I think the answer is yes, for two reasons. One is companies have been, as you pointed out, Lisa, they have been getting more aggressive. And secondly, just given what's happened, right? Balance sheets are going to be weakening just for the very fact that in many industries, revenues are going to be, at least temporarily, are going to be lower. And that's going to flow through to balance sheet and credit metrics.
Gershon, fantastic to catch up with this morning. Appreciate your expertise. And my best to the team. While you're Gershon Distenfeld of AB, co-head of fixed income. Let's get you some news, some headlines worldwide, shall we? Let's check in with Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Good morning, John, Lisa, Tom. The University of Washington coronavirus model, often cited by the White House, revised its projections to nearly 135,000 COVID-19 related deaths in America. White House coronavirus task force member Dr. Anthony Fauci says models that change numbers can confuse people, but the principles behind them don't change.
When you have a lot of virus activity and you know that you're able to contain it to a certain degree by the mitigation, the physical separations, the kinds of things that we've been talking about, gateway, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and you start to leapfrog over some of these, you're inviting rebound.
Dr. Fauci is also shooting down theories that the coronavirus was man-made. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases director tells National Geographic that the virus was in the wild to begin with. With more local governments moving ahead with their own plans for reopening, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced the state will begin gradually allowing clothing stores, florists, bookstores, and sporting goods shops to open their doors as early as Friday. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti says he wants to be careful about reopening too quickly.
Here in Los Angeles, we've been lucky. We adopted swift measures. We've expanded testing to everybody, including asymptomatic people. We have some best practices, not just in this country, but I think in the world. But all that could go away, especially in a city where 96% of us have not yet gotten coronavirus.
Garcetti says Los Angeles will begin to reopen on May 15th. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think I want to pick up on that word. Optimism. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, yesterday using that word. It's an optimistic day. We are getting very, very close to making some announcements that I think will be very meaningful to people in the retail sector. We're making some progress, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about it. As I mentioned earlier, you see it in Germany as well.
Equity futures with a lift, up 32 on the S&P 500, up a little more than 1% from New York. This
If you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time, then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg.
The trampoline that makes Dad feel like a kid again. The projector that turns film night into outdoor cinema night. The hot tub that transforms your garden into a spa retreat. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Somebody has a stroke every 5 minutes in the UK. With time, though, courage, and the right support, lives can be rebuilt. Mine was. But with this current crisis, I can't imagine how much harder it must be for the stroke survivor and their family, more isolated and alone than ever. The Stroke Association is working tirelessly to support the NHS and develop new ways to rebuild lives. To find out more or to donate, search Stroke Association now.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised
over £500 million for charities and good causes. They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL managed lotteries on 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Fiat Chrysler reporting a net loss in the first quarter compared to a profit a year earlier. It said first quarter deliveries were down 21%. Alexion agreeing to buy Portola for $18 a share in cash. The deal worth about $1.4 billion. Marathon Petroleum took a charge of $12.4 billion in the first quarter on a non-cash impairment as America's biggest fuel maker adjusts to severely lower demand for its product in the wake of a global pandemic. Futures this morning higher. S&P futures up 31 points. Dow futures up 259. NASDAQ futures up 110. The DAX in Germany's up 1.4%. 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds. Yield 0.65%. Yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up 10.5% or $2.17 at $22.55 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.5% or $8.40 at $17.04.90 an ounce. The euro 1.0836 against the dollar. The yen 106.72. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. Optimistic progress. That's the story this morning. The largest economy in the United States, California, slowly reopening. That could begin on Friday. And New York, the third largest economy in the United States, Tom, might only be a few weeks behind. This is good news.
Yeah, it's good news, great news. And of course, there's all these other experiments coast to coast, the beaches like 4 or 5 days ago between Alabama, Texas, and California. Now we move on to like really the on-the-ground battles, John, about opening up. Kevin Cirilli is our chief Washington correspondent. Kevin, this thing with liability and lawsuits, Republicans and Democrats, is all of a sudden, I mean, is there any other issue in Washington?
And we'll get to watch it on television with the Supreme Court. Look, I think honestly it will end up in the Supreme Court, all of these cases that are making its way through. And I'm not a legal expert, but I would imagine that that's where all of this is headed. I think there's a couple of issues in terms of what folks are focusing on this morning in Washington, D.C. There is this now open debate and an ideological one as it relates to the Senate convening, the House not. Look, I mean, I think that there is to be factored into this. There are obviously more members of the House of Representatives than in the Senate and whatnot. But it is really illustrative of where Republicans are on this in terms of reopening the economy, and most Democrats are. The president is headed to Arizona today, the first time that he's ventured out of the White House or during this pandemic. He will not be holding a rally, but he will be doing a tour of a plant, and that I think has Democrats not necessarily publicly nervous, but it does, I think, say something that the president's going to be able to go to states like Arizona to get the local media coverage, to get the motorcade in the local markets, and former Vice President Joe Biden, as of now, has not done that.
So I think the important question for us to really get our hands around, for market participants as well, these decisions to reopen economies, are they because of public pressure? I'm looking at California. Or are they because of the data? The data has improved, and we've gone through a threshold, which means we can reopen. From your reporting, Kevin, which one is it?
It's both. It's 1,000% both. And look at a state like Pennsylvania, where you have Governor Wolf, who's a Democrat, getting pressure from Senator Pat Toomey, a Republican. Senator Toomey, really releasing a reopen the Pennsylvania plan the morning after, not even the day, like hours after Governor Wolf released his, and that is playing out all over the country, whether it's in California and various cities in California, and the local. This is where it's a very localized issue. The local business communities, whether it's in Arizona, whether it's in California, Pennsylvania, Michigan, where you see the protesters, for example, it's this spasm of localized business communities that transcends left or right politics, and these local businesses are the ones that really have the ear of their state capitals. So that's what you're noticing as well. But the data, and we talked about this before, guys, the data of how the virus has played in New York City, an epicenter, versus in rural America, it's just different. And so that's why I think you're seeing the various the back and forth. I do want to just follow up with some comments with yesterday as it relates to China. Speaking of a local issue, when the president talks about tariffs and that uneasiness that Beijing could retaliate against the heartland with tariffs in an election year, China state-run media has really been going after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Remember, Secretary Pompeo delivered a series of speeches to governors, to Silicon Valley, well before the pandemic. Yeah. And so Pompeo has really been taking direct hits coming from Beijing. Something tells me that that's not going to bother him. But it is interesting to see how the rhetoric over the last week between the U.S. and China has increased.
Kevin, let's stick with the reopening, since that does seem to be sort of determining part of the sentiment that we're seeing in markets today. And I'm wondering, going forward, how much public health officials feel like this has to be more coordinated on a national level. What has the evidence in Europe shown in terms of localized plans to reopen versus more coordinated ones?
So based upon my reporting, I think that every lawmaker that I've spoken with, Lisa, throughout all of this, Democrat or Republican, has really pushed for this to be a localized or a state-run issue, just because the dynamics in different states and municipalities all over the country are just so different no matter where you go. And I think, to your point, Europe has been a model to some extent, and the optimism of what we're seeing in Italy and other European countries is on full display here. But I think the broader question is, how do you reopen but also have this expectation that you might have to close again for a week or two? And that's something that is really being openly discussed. But the bottom line, Arizona is set to reopen later this week. We had Georgia last week, and it's not gonna be a hit a button and everyone runs to the stores type of situation. But the lawmakers are openly discussing how that is going to manifest itself. And in terms of a policy being driven out of Washington, D.C., I think that energy and airline industries are probably right now jumping to the head of the pack of assistance coming from the federal government should there be a next round of economic assistance in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Kevin, fantastic to catch up with you.
Thanks, guys.
As always. Thanks for getting up early for us. Kevin Cerruti there, down in Washington, on the latest on reopening and the risk of a second wave of infections, which I believe is the tail risk right now for markets worldwide. Here's some good news for you guys. May 18th, that's when the beer gardens will reopen in Bavaria. We have a date, Tom.
Yeah, John, I don't think Kevin was getting up early. I think he was coming in from
isn't this is early for DC,
Quattro de Mayo.
He celebrated on the 4th.
You celebrated the 4th, he's going to roll it right over here. Cinco de Mayo.
Tom King, Lisa Brabbits, Jonathan Ferro, you are listening to Bloomberg Surveillance Live on Bloomberg Radio. Equity futures, we drift higher. We had some weight to yesterday's gains. The S&P 500 up 28, positive 1% from New York. This is Bloomberg Radio.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations. So we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick. The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We are live on Bloomberg Radio, 2 hours away from the opening bell. Equity futures higher, up 30 points on the S&P 500, positive a little more than 1 full percentage point. In the bond market, Treasury yields drift higher, up by 3 basis points on a 10-year to 0.66%. In the bond market, take a look at Italy, a lift at the front end, up 20 basis points on a 2-year note to 0.81% off the back of this clash between Germany's top court and the European Central Bank. That is infecting the FX market as well. Euro dollar comes in 0.7%. That is a weaker euro on this morning's screen, Tom.
Really interesting, John. Give me the significance of Italy here. Now, it's backed up, higher yields. I looked at spreads the other day, the difference, folks, of yields between Italy and Germany, and it's not like crisis, is it, John?
Not a crisis yet, but there is a problem right now, and Lisa touched on it at the start of the program. This tension between Germany's top court and the ECB. The tension is over the public sector purchase program, and the question is whether that bleeds over to the pandemic emergency purchase program, which is dominating this bond market and largely supporting the periphery, countries like Italy. And I think many people are scratching their heads and thinking, does this start to bleed over to the other issues, Tom? And does this hamper the ECB's ability to really support Italy in a moment like this one?
This is unbelievable. John, you should move to Frankfurt and cover the ECB.
He's trying to get you out of here. Is that what you're doing?
Tom's trying to get me back to Frankfurt.
He's like, you should move back to Germany.
Tom's trying to send me back about 7-8 years.
You can only go back to Frankfurt if you wear a hat like Matt Miller.
Yeah, I think Matt's doing a good job. I think Matt's got control of this one.
Bonus round, his German is absolutely exquisite.
It's fantastic, yeah.
Speaking of exquisite, is a gentleman, James Bevan from London, who has the audacity to actually think long term. And I mean, folks, longer term than so many that we speak to on Global Wall Street. He is with CCL and he joins us right now. James, what is long-term for you right now? Is long-term getting to 2021, or is long-term for you out a decade?
Tom, I absolutely think we have to have a multi-year perspective of where value goes. There is no point paying up top dollar to participate in equity markets at current levels unless we are absolutely confident that the corporate earnings numbers are going to come through. Equally, I look at bond market yields, and they are so far below what I reasonably project for medium-term inflation that I think that they are currently legal theft in many markets.
Okay, well, that's fine. And so there's the value of cash. Is cash, and folks, I say this with immense respect for Mr. Bevan's institutional advice that he gives in London. James, is cash an asset for you right now?
Tom, I am holding in balanced mandates around 10 percentage points in cash. And that's not because I believe that cash long-term is going to deliver the returns consistent with investors' expectations, but because I worry about the fragility of the equity market rally from the 23rd March low. What we have seen, and you will absolutely recognize this, is a huge expansion of the multiple that investors are being asked to pay to participate in equity market prospects. And I would say that drive has been the result of the Federal Reserve and the US government throwing an awful lot of liquidity at markets, rather than any fundamental perspective of whether or not value is still available at these levels. To cut to the chase, I think that we will see about $120 for S&P 500 earnings this year, and about $150 for 2021. Now, if I were paying 18 or 19 times the 2021 earnings at the end of this year, that would give me a year-end target for the S&P 500 of 27 to 2,900 points, and we're there already. And that leaves me to worry about what will happen to markets if we don't get the V-shaped recovery. Now, the market is busy saying it no longer thinks we're going to get a V-shaped recovery, and yet equity markets continue to plow higher. And that disconnect worries me, and hence my appetite to hold a bit more cash.
James, the liquidity definitely is a story, and certainly in the United States, people are putting their faith in the Federal Reserve and ongoing fiscal stimulus from Congress. In Europe, however, I'm wondering how much that faith will get shaken by the recent decision by the German court system, based on this idea that perhaps the ECB could be challenged in the future with respect particularly to their peripheral bond purchases. We do see Italian yields rising, the euro weakening. Do you expect that to continue?
I find the European situation truly fascinating. We've not yet got the details from the European Central Bank of the target to lending numbers. What we do know is that they have risen to an all-time high. Now, I have attempted to analyse who's borrowing from the target 2 system. Now, we know that Germany and the other northern countries have been providing cash into the target 2 system. The market focus, as you have identified, is on Italy. But actually, when I trace what's going on with the Italian economy and markets, I don't think that Italy is the principal problem. I think the two problem areas actually are Spain, because Spain is facing capital flight at the moment and therefore is likely drawing heavily on target 2. And equally the French banks. I think that many people probably don't appreciate that a lot of the cash created by the Federal Reserve through its quantitative easing programs ends up being taken by the French banks via the ECB and then relent to emerging markets for what is in effect a carry trade. And I suspect that the French banks now represent very high-risk investments.
What does your exposure look like to European financials at the moment, James?
Almost nil, John. I look at the problems of the Eurozone. I absolutely am not predicting that the Euro will break, but I find it very hard to see how European financials make any sensible money in a climate of negative interest rates. I mean, after all, what we have in the German banking system are the requirement for the Bundesbank to provide money into target 2 in order to satisfy the requirements of the European Central Bank. The Bundesbank doesn't have any of its own money. It calls on capital from the commercial banks, and then to add insult to injury, then sends them a bill because of negative interest rates.
Doesn't sound like an investment opportunity for many people listening to the programme either.
I agree.
James, I'm leaning on the conversation that you and I have had over the chunk of the best part of a decade. I remember a man who used to like the UK banks, the UK financials, Lloyds, Barclays. Where do you stand on those names, those institutions now, James?
Well, I think that the UK economy is going to have an absolutely miserable time, and therefore I think that the UK banks are going to be squeezed quite horribly. And I think it's going to be a combination of squeezed by fundamental realities. So many businesses are going to fail and simply shut up shop through the current crisis. And at the same time, I really don't think that the government, having provided money to support the banks, is going to allow shareholders to make supernormal returns. So against that backcloth, I do think that the UK banks are a bad place to be right now.
James Bevan, thank you so much. Really, really brilliant. Thank you so much with CCLA this morning. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM report, always brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, ranked in the top 2% nationally for alumni mid-career earnings and number 1 for student upward economic mobility. Learn more at njit.edu. Here's John Tucker.
And good morning, Tom. Antibody testing has been trumpeted by world leaders as a potential game changer to reopen economies and lift lockdowns. Writing for Bloomberg Business Week, our reporter Stephanie Baker got herself tested after fearing she was exposed to the virus while on a ski trip in February.
So when these antibody tests were being talked about, I was really eager to find out and plunged myself into this world to see if some of the criticism of these tests were valid, that they were unreliable, and indeed I found out they were unreliable and gave me conflicting results.
Well, she is okay, but she endured what turned into a series of maddening, discomforting, and nerve-wracking tests. Temperatures in April were on par with the previous warmest April on record 4 years ago, with extremely high temperatures in some parts of Europe. Europe's Copernicus Climate Change Service says Switzerland reported an average April temperature 3 degrees Celsius warmer than the average between 1991 and 2020. And Tom Cruise might be taking his daredevil acting to another level. The Hollywood star reports he's joining hands with Elon Musk to shoot a film in space. According to Deadline, Cruise and SpaceX in talks with NASA for filming the narrative aboard a real SpaceX vessel. Well, some would say that Tom Cruise has been in outer space for some time now. And that is the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report.
Thanks for that.
He's editorializing.
That was editorializing.
That was.
I admit it.
I don't know if that was editorializing. That wasn't just objective reporting on the facts.
Well, thank you, John.
Come on.
John, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Let's get some news, some headlines worldwide. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, John, Lisa, Tom. For much of the last 2 months, President Donald Trump has rarely left the grounds of the White House amid the coronavirus pandemic. That changes today when the president is scheduled to travel to Arizona to visit a Honeywell facility manufacturing N95 masks. The president suggests it will mark the return to more regular travel. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell opened the floor of the Senate yesterday after 5 weeks away.
I'm grateful that all 100 of us have come through the last several weeks safely and in good health. Now let's work together across the aisle and get some more work done.
McConnell said the chamber would be acting on key nominations as it relates directly to the safety of the American people, oversight of our coronavirus legislation, and more. But that's not the case, according to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Judicial nominees, legal immunity for big corporations. In all due respect, Republican leader, these are not the nation's most urgent priorities right now.
Schumer says McConnell has scheduled no significant COVID-related business for the Senate floor. Americans clearly oppose the reopening of restaurants, retail stores, and other businesses during the pandemic. According to a Washington Post University of Maryland poll, many Americans have been making trips to grocery stores, and 56% say they're comfortable doing that. However, when it comes to shopping at a retail clothing store, 67% say they would be uncomfortable doing that, and 78% would be uncomfortable eating at a sit-down restaurant. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's going to be so difficult to normalise things, especially for certain sectors like restaurants, airlines too. Here's one for you, Tom Keene. First class and business. will no longer be boarding first on some of these airlines. You may be boarding last.
To be honest, I've always wondered about that. I've never gotten why
I say
the back of the
you
plane first.
may be boarding last.
Yes.
The economy passengers, the rest of us, will now be boarding first.
We will be going to the back of the plane, and we will likely get more space too. So it will be interesting to see how many people will be willing to pay up for that business and first class fare.
Well, one of our staff just flew, and she said 3 in first class, 4 or 5 in business, and the rest of the plane had maybe 20 people. That's sad.
It's really sad, and they're really going to struggle. And the latest news we got overnight actually was United cutting admin and managerial positions.
Managers, yeah.
And think about 3,500, Lisa, and this is just the start of much more to come for this industry, I'm sure.
I'm struck by what Warren Buffett said, this idea that air travel will never be the same. And I was reading some comments from a number of businesses that are expecting to send their employees on fewer international trips. I mean, this idea that people just won't travel as much after this is taking hold. I wonder how much that's going to be the reality.
It's going to take a long, long time to get things back to normal. We talked about this quote from Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin yesterday. He was asked about reopening global travel this year on Fox Business, and he said it's too hard to tell at this point. I hope down the road it is. Our priority is opening up the domestic economy. And I think a number of months ago, Tom, if you said to me 6 weeks ago, that we'd still be talking about not opening international travel at the back end of the year, I don't think many people would have believed us.
And quickly, John, you're going to get an update from Mr. Kudlow on Friday on Jobs Day. That'll be interesting.
Going to be a brutal jobs report this coming Friday. We'll be bringing the numbers, the analysis right here on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
If you say that you are mine.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Members of the U.S. women's national team say they will appeal after they lost a legal challenge over equal pay. A judge ruled against the equal pay allegations the team was making and said the women's team can't retroactively deem their agreement worse than the men's team since they have had years of winning seasons.
It sort of, for me, missed the point, but it was very disappointing, to be honest.
Megan Rapinoe tells ABC she does not see the validity in the judge's argument.
If I earn $1 every time I play and a man earns $3, just because I win 10 games and he only wins 3 games, and so I made $10 and he made $9, I'm not sure how that's me making more money while having to essentially win everything that we could possibly have won over these past few years. 2 World Cups and just about every game we played.
The team sued back in 2019. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Global news 24 hours a day.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
Somebody has a stroke every 5 minutes in the UK. With time, though, courage, and the right support, lives can be rebuilt. Mine was. But with this current crisis, I can't imagine how much harder it must be for the stroke survivor and their family, more isolated and alone than ever. The Stroke Association is working tirelessly to support the NHS and develop new ways to rebuild lives. To find out more or to donate, search Stroke Association now.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Alexion Pharmaceuticals, a maker of rare disease medicines, agreed to buy Portola Pharmaceuticals for about $1.4 billion to branch out into blood disorders. Fiat Chrysler swinging to a loss in the first quarter after the car maker's sales and profits were hit by the virus outbreak in Europe and in the U.S., where plants have been closed since mid-March. Marathon Petroleum taking a $12.4 billion charge in the first quarter on the reduced value of its business in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and saying it will suspend share buybacks and cut spending by 30%. And Marriott International raising $920 million in cash through deals with co-branded credit card companies as it awaits out the pause in travel due to the coronavirus. Futures this morning are moving higher, with S&P futures up about 30 points. Dow futures up 248. NASDAQ futures up 104. The DAX in Germany is up 1.4%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32. The yield 0.65%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up 10.7%, up $2.17 at $22.57 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.4%, down $7 at $17.0630 an ounce. The euro 1.0836 against the dollar. British pound 1.2456, and the yen 106.69. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you very much. Here's a quote from the global research team at JP Morgan. The V-shaped recovery playing out in many asset class has raised hopes that we will see a similar V-shaped economic recovery, but this appears unlikely to play out. The global recovery coming out of the lockdown is best described as a wave and not a letter, Tom.
Love the idea of a wave and the multidimensionality of that. Joyce Chang is head of research at JP Morgan. She's done a spectacular job in getting our attention, and particularly was shockingly prescient on a glide path to a weaker China GDP. Joyce, just to begin here and give you a modest victory lap, even if the circumstances were a surprise on the China collapse, is there signs that JP Morgan sees that China's recovering, so John gets a different alphabet soup of recovery?
Well, the only country that I actually think is going to look V-shaped is actually China. The rest of it is a wave, a fish hook, a Nike swoosh, whatever you want to call it. But China's GDP in the first quarter was down 35%. The U.S. was down 5%, the Euro area down almost 15%. So China in the second quarter, we see coming back in a very V-shaped way and sustaining that. And that's because, their ability to prevent a second wave and really clamp down, I think is still in a very different place than some of the other advanced economies, which just don't have the capability of doing that. So China's recovery, I do think, will be V-shaped, but we're talking 1.3% growth here. We started the year at 5.9%, so it is a massive slowdown. A 14.5% of GDP deficit, which exceeds what they did during the global financial crisis. But I think they will see something more V-shaped than the rest of the world.
There's a well-known quote from the British economist Ronald Coase, and it goes as follows: if you torture the data long enough, it will confess to anything. Pretty much everyone is torturing the data right now and is confessing to anything. And what I always find fascinating about moments like these, Joyce, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, is that we all have the same data in front of us, yet we come up with radically different ideas about the future. And I'm just wondering, Joyce, how you look at the data today and extrapolate that out to come up with what a recovery looks like.
Well, I think you've got to look at the data, but then you also have to see that it was markets first, and that was V-shaped. So everybody then wanted the economy to V-shape. Then you had everybody thought the virus, will it be even more death, more extended? And now you're seeing that everything's restarting. So everybody's hopeful that the economy's restarting. That's what they want to see right now. And there are signs of that. When you shut down so much, some of it will come back. But whether it can be sustained, that's the real question mark. And when we talk about V-shaped, we really look at what will happen by the end of 2021. And here we think that you're going to have nearly 4 percentage points off of global growth. So it's not V-shaped when you look at this on a 2-year view at all.
Joyce, I guess that there's a tension here between perhaps a lack of a V-shaped recovery, but the massive Federal Reserve stimulus and the stimulus coming from the fiscal governments around the world. I mean, this idea that will support valuations as much as though we were getting a V-shaped recovery in the economic data. And so it doesn't necessarily matter if we don't get the underlying statistics to justify it. Do you buy this, the sort of don't fight the Fed mantra that worked for more than a decade?
Well, don't fight the Fed has definitely been the story so far, because you had the sharpest sell-off in March and also one of the sharpest rebounds in April. So you've got to expect some consolidation here. But the real question is the Fed a backstop so you don't drop further, but is it a stimulus? Are we going to actually see that stimulus play through? And that's where, there's still real question marks on what the growth glide path is going to look like going forward. So, you're going to see, given such a sharp quarterly drop, that there will be a rebound. But whether that can be sustained over the course of the remainder of the year and into next year is the real question mark. And you've got the geopolitics that we're still going to have to watch in all of this. U.S. elections, the court ruling in Germany also shows that there's still a lack of cohesion within the euro area.
Tell me what your team is steeled for Friday at 8:30 when we get an unemployment rate that no one alive in America has ever experienced. I mean, from Bruce Kasman on down to your lowliest of, number crunchers. What's going to happen at 8:31 when we see 15% unemployment rate?
Well, the unemployment numbers are just staggering. They're nothing that we could have even had in any scenario or imagination, on our part. I mean, 25 million unemployed, could this be 30 million unemployed? I mean, the whole population of the state of New York is, 19 million. So I think that, the question really will be that the way these programs are designed is that they are not permanent. They're supposed to self-liquidate when the economy is restored. Can you really restore these jobs as we get into later in the year, and which ones on the services side are going to linger and still have an unemployment rate that could still be around 10%, even if it comes off of the peak? That's the real question, and that's the real question for the growth story, and also whether you're going to see more stimulus packages necessary. And we are seeing now that the Congress, the Senate's gone back into session, the House next week. I think you will see another stimulus package because of these unemployment numbers.
Joyce, we appreciate your time this morning. Always fantastic to get your views on this program. JP Morgan Chair of Global Research there, Joyce Chang, on the latest, what they're seeing in this market and this global economy. In this market right now, we are up by 32 points on the S&P 500, positive 1.11%. Though I have to say, Tom, what you said was really, really important. On Friday, we will have a number that nobody alive in this country has ever seen before. An unemployment rate that is sky high and a monthly jobs figure of negative 21 million. Negative 21 million, just unreal.
And beneath the data, John, will be the wage dynamics. And I don't know how you do the math on that if a third of America, which I've never framed for a moment in my life, but a third of America doesn't have a wage to have a wage with.
And that's the problem. Not just right now, but coming out of this as well. What do the wage dynamics look like as we reopen? And is anyone willing really to increase wages at this point to get people back onto the payroll? From New York this morning, good morning to you all. You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance. We're live on Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. It would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from, we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe.
We've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking.
Which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Sports fans, this is David Jacoby telling you to check out the Chicago Bulls documentary, The Last Dance, as it continues this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN.
Our biggest challenge is us. I am cursing this mentality of competitiveness.
Competition is an addiction.
Every game is a battle.
Dennis, get up here. And then, immediately after the show, listen to Jalen Jacoby's After Show podcast featuring The Last Dance director, Jason Eyre. Search Jalen and Jacoby to start listening today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
Certainly, we've got to put a floor under the economic carnage.
Markets didn't believe the coronavirus would take down the world economy.
Finance.
The sellers are not necessarily finished, but quite exhausted.
Investment.
That's the reality that we have to settle ourselves to. This is the start of a depression.
We're going to have a bounce back when everything is open. The question is, what is the shape of the economy from there?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. John Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. We welcome all of you coast to coast around the world, particularly those of you on all of our digital platforms as you work from home. We are too. It is a beautiful day here in New York City as we address the rest of the week. Wednesday, ADP. Thursday, another bout of those weekly claims. I'm thinking 3-ish million is a statistic right now. And then we go to the true history we will see at 8:30 Friday morning. The backdrop are really quite constructive markets. John, it's remarkable to see the VIX again move from 40 down to 35 with a nice, solid correlated lift to equities.
Things are picking up. I think there's just a belief, the hope that this is the worst of it, Tom, this coming week. Negative 21.5 million is the estimate, median estimate in our survey for the payrolls report on Friday. 3 million in and around what you mentioned for initial jobless claims this coming Thursday as well. For the market, Tom, just as an observation, what I'm looking at right now, that tension between the ECB and Germany once again, largely seen in the market right now as a problem for Italy, a problem for Europe, not a problem for the rest of the world. The pains in the bond market in Italy yields 10 to 15 basis points higher.
We all have our measurements, folks, and we welcome all of you across this nation of how we're getting back to work. For me, Lisa, it's right across from the wonderful donation of Henry Kravis to Mount Sinai, and the street is nowhere near as crowded as it was before this crisis, but maybe we're back a third. It's getting a little busier on the streets of New York.
Yeah, the focus really turning to the reopening of certain major economies. California planning to reopen, New York planning its the beginnings of its reopening. But we should be really cautious here because New York City proper is not going to be reopening for a long time. Bars, restaurants, entertainment, that is still not anywhere near the schedule. And I got to say, as people have kids and think about summer camps, most of them are canceled, I will tell you from personal experience. There's a question, what is the new normal?
One more thing here before we get to our wonderful guests on state and local community. John, I've got to ask how the United Kingdom is doing. I'm looking at the statistics of cases. I'm looking at the statistics of deaths. I even looked at the deaths in Ireland yesterday with a most difficult slope. The UK, to me, seems like within the epidemiology, it's actually doing better than the United States.
Well, to be clear here, the health situation in the United Kingdom has been absolutely tragic. As far as it comes to reopening the economy, I think there's tremendous pressure on the UK to come up with a plan. And what we've started to see emerge in places like Italy, California, and eventually in New York as well is several phases. And in the first phase, you open up manufacturing and construction. And much further down the line, to Lisa's point, it's in the largest cities that we will move last on things like restaurants, bars, and the consumer-facing sector that dominates the global economy, the West, Europe, the United States, the UK.
It is so interesting to see. Michael Zezas with Morgan Stanley joins us right now, and all of this about local communities and states. And to say they're broke, I would say, is off the mark. But, Michael, this is going to be just a major, major effort through municipal finance to recover from this. How does Morgan Stanley see that path forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's the right question to be asking. You know, we went ahead and tried to size up what we thought states, both individually and cumulatively, how far off the mark they were going to be on budgets through the end of their next fiscal year. And we think that's going to be about $180 billion. So that sounds like a big number, but I think if you're an investor, you have to understand that there's a difference here between looking at that number and seeing jump to default risk, which we don't, and instead seeing a number of measures, austerity, and other options that perhaps leave you with downgrades and negative rating pressure, but not in a more serious situation. So, for example, you can get $180 billion down to $60 billion if you drain reserves, if you flatten out spending year over year, or you don't even have to necessarily do that. You could tap the Fed's MLF, which has about $250 billion of borrowing capacity that could cover that shortfall. Of course, that doesn't eliminate the pain. It just spreads it out. But it does tell you that unless Congress is going to make another appropriation here, one way or another, there's probably some austerity. And in addition to negative rating pressure, that also drags on the economy, even as the private sector is rebounding.
I got really lucky yesterday evening because your most recent note on Moody's was on my reading list for yesterday evening before I even knew you were on the show. So fantastic to catch up with you, Michael. Yeah. And what I've noticed in your research is you draw a clear line between downgrade risk and default risk. And on downgrade risk, something that you guys are focused on, state level austerity. Can you just give us a little bit of color there, Michael, on what you're expecting in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, well, you got 50 states. You could have 50 very different paths, right? Because your options are pretty substantial. There's tax increases, there's spending cuts, there's using reserves, there's tapping the Fed's municipal liquidity facility. So I think if you assume that states are going to do a mix of all of those things, then there's probably going to be some spending cuts, some revenue increases, and again, I think the net of the story is that there will be austerity pain throughout the system. There probably will be draining of reserves, and so you get a little bit of a drag on the economy. You get a little bit of negative rating pressure. By the way, this is more or less the same playbook states had to go through in the global financial crisis, but of course they didn't even have access to a Fed borrowing facility then either. So I think there's actually reason, even though this recession is quite a bit sharper, to be a little more optimistic on how states can sort of chart their path through this.
So we are hearing from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that she'd like to see some sort of additional spending up to $1 trillion to help the states. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell originally totally put cold water on that, saying that he'd rather see them file for bankruptcy. Recently, he's been taking a more constructive tone on that possibility and seems resigned to it. How much does that plug the gap, or is that just barely scratching the surface in terms of muni finances?
It depends on the number they actually settle on, but I think we need, in our base case, so assuming something like a V to U-shaped recovery, $180 billion would do the trick. In our bear case, it would be something more like $375 billion. And again, that's just for the states. So in the past, you've seen states typically get about 55% of any state and local government aid appropriation. So the big number that you'd want to look for is if they were to settle on something between $650 and $700 billion, that would probably do it. Or in the base case, it could be something smaller, about $350 billion would probably do the trick or get the states the share that they need to more or less make this problem go away.
So that's short term. Longer term, there's a question about structural changes that'll get sort of reinforced after this pandemic is over. And I'm thinking of work from home types of practices that take people out of the big cities and remove some of the tax base. How much is that going to affect the finances of the likes of New York City?
Yeah, it's really tough to game that out. I think there have been a lot of investors who've made assumptions about demographic and migration patterns and just assume that there would be sort of a massive move from high-tax states and high-cost states to lower-tax states. And those views have been consistently wrong, largely because there are economic benefits that exist inside of those states that continue to kind of replenish high human capital. So I think it's really hard to suss that out. I do think what's interesting this time around is that work from home in some ways actually benefited some of these higher tax, higher income states because unlike in the global financial crisis, it preserves those jobs and that tax base better.
Michael, can I ask a rude question? I mean, it's Cinco de Mayo. I got to get tuned up here. Gerald Ford or whatever in the mythology said drop dead New York. Does Mitch McConnell have the power, the authority, the ability to say drop dead Democratic states?
I mean, in so much as he thinks it's in the interest of him and the Republican Party to block any appropriation, further appropriation of aid to states in general. I suppose he does, but the suggestion that bankruptcy should be the path forward here. It felt like more of a negotiation tactic than something real. Right. You'd have to change the bankruptcy code to make that happen. There's questions as to whether or not it's even constitutional for a state to declare bankruptcy because it gives up its sovereignty to a federal court. Personally, we didn't get too riled up about that headline.
John, has Parliament ever said drop dead London?
A lot of people in Parliament who represent jurisdictions outside of London, Tom, regions, towns, have said drop dead London many times, and I'm sure they'll continue to do so as well. Michael, let me fit in one last question if we can.
Sure. Yep.
The unity in Washington. I've been really, really encouraged over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 months on how well Secretary Mnuchin has worked with Democrats. Do you see that falling apart anytime soon?
Not soon, but I would be concerned that this next CARES Act might be your last bite at the apple for quite some time. I think what the Democrats and the Republicans have been able to agree on is kind of this concept of bridge liquidity to the economy, and not much beyond that. So personally, I wouldn't get expectations too high about it in a big infrastructure package or something that's really just beyond taking the existing CARES Act and extending it out. And the 2020 election actually therefore becomes a bit of a catalyst to watch, because if you think you're going to need more stimulus on the back end of that for the U.S. economy to achieve escape velocity, then how big it is and what it looks like then becomes a function of what happens in November.
Michael, always great to get your thoughts on a programme. I appreciate your time and the team's research. Michael Zezas there of Morgan Stanley, the head of US research and municipal strategist. Let's get you up to speed on the story in worldwide. Your news, your headlines. Let's get up to speed with Michael Barr. Hey, Michael.
Hey, John, Lisa, Tom. Americans are asking why the projected number of coronavirus deaths jumped to more than 100,000, according to the model often cited by the White House. It comes as states are starting to reopen their economies today. Bloomberg's Martin DeCarroll reports.
The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington altered its forecast. It's now estimating 135,000 deaths in the United States by mid-August. It cited the easing of social distancing measures expected in 31 states by May 11th. Public health experts continue to warn against premature moves. The nation's top infectious disease specialist, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is asking governors to stick to the federal government's criteria.
You start to leapfrog over some of these, you're inviting rebound.
The concern is the U.S. will find itself where it was in mid-March. In Washington, Martin DeCarroll, Bloomberg Radio.
President Trump travels to Arizona to visit a Honeywell facility manufacturing N95 masks. The president has rarely left the White House grounds in about 2 months. The trip means a small army of advisors, logistical experts, and security staff will also resume regularly hitting the road and taking a measure of risk to assist President Trump. In Venezuela,
mercenario profesional de los Estados Unidos.
President Nicolas Maduro announced on state TV they've arrested 2 U.S. men they're calling mercenaries of President Trump. Maduro showed off their passports, saying they were caught in a foiled plot to try and capture the leader of Venezuela. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Michael Barr there with your news, your headlines worldwide. Here's your price action this Tuesday morning. Just off session highs on the S&P 500. Looking good, up 37, positive 1.31% as states like California start to plan out how they reopen as soon as this week. States like New York indicate they could be just a few weeks behind. That is fueling optimism this Tuesday morning. Outside of that, in the bond market, Treasury yields as follows. Yields up just 2 basis points on a 10-year, up 5 on a 30-year yield. The story in Italy, much more brutal for the Italian bond market as the tension between the ECB and Germany's top court intensifies once again. Yields up 11 basis points at a front end on a 2-year in Italy. Your yield, 0.73%. From New York.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Influential conversation.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Somebody has a stroke every 5 minutes in the UK. With time, though, courage, and the right support, lives can be rebuilt. Mine was. But with this current crisis, I can't imagine how much harder it must be for the stroke survivor and their family, more isolated and alone than ever. The Stroke Association is working tirelessly to support the NHS and develop new ways to rebuild lives. To find out more or to donate, search Stroke Association now.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are climbing alongside European shares with sentiment lifted as more economies move toward easing their coronavirus lockdowns. Oil's heading for its longest winning streak in 9 months. The S&P 500 futures are pointing to more gains on Wall Street as investors digest the latest earnings, including a beat from chemical maker DuPont. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg, with S&P futures up 38 points right now. Dow futures up 319. NASDAQ futures up 122. The DAX in Germany is up 1.9%. 10-year Treasury down 7/32, yield 0.65%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up more than 11%, up $2.30 at $22.69 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.5%, or $8.30 at $17.0490 an ounce. The euro 1.0847 against the dollar. British pound 1.2456 and the yen 106.71. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you very much. The Walt Disney Company very much in focus. If you're a company right now with a streaming business, you're probably doing very well. If you own a sports network, you're probably struggling. You have no sports to show. And if you own theme parks, Tom, well, they're closed, aren't they? So it's going to be a mixed story a little bit later.
It is. And, John, I'm fascinated by this after the Universal thing with the trolls where, to make a long story short, they bypassed the movie theaters. You wonder with the pandemic, is it going to be a seismic change for this thing called content and the kings of it, which, of course, is out in Burbank. David Hager joins us now with Edward Jones on Walt Disney. David, just cut to the chase. Is the pandemic literally an opportunity for Walt Disney?
Well, it certainly appears to be an opportunity for the Disney Plus service and being able to distribute content online. Certainly the company already has seen pretty good success with Disney Plus. Already has hit 50 million subscribers, much sooner than anybody had been expecting. Following the rollout in Europe, and so on one hand you have that strong opportunity, but a number of parts of the business still going to be struggling for quite a while with theme parks shut down and the movie studio shut down as well. So you have both opportunity and yet a lot of challenges here in the near term.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the mix of income for Disney. I mean, the streaming business has been huge when it comes to the volume of subscribers, but not so great when it comes to profitability. How is it increasing share away from the theme park industry, away from, say, the ESPN conglomeration?
Well, certainly the online offerings are the primary where they're looking at expanding beyond the traditional media realm. And
not only through Disney Plus, but also through majority ownership of Hulu, and then also the ESPN Plus service. But that is the near-term challenges. The services are not yet profitable. Certainly revenue growing very quickly with the growth in subscribers, but really it's a scale game that they're really going to have to ramp the subscribers pretty substantially to make the service profitable and start offsetting the longer-term decline in traditional cable TV channels as subscribers are cutting the cord.
And the decline elsewhere as well, David. And I think that's something we've got to think about, what it looks like as we reopen and start to normalize, what this relationship between content producers and theatre owners starts to look like on the other side of this. In your mind, as you look at things at the moment, all the pieces coming together, what kind of future do you see?
Well, certainly I think there's going to be a slow ramp as even as parks reopen and the movie studio is able to reopen, that there's certainly going to be some people who are cautious about returning to public venues, and so there may be also a somewhat permanent shift of some people may just prefer having been watching more of their content online to seek it that way on a more permanent basis. And certainly we've seen an initial step, as was mentioned, NBC Universal rolled out Trolls online and had surprising success.
Tom, did you even watch it?
Yeah, of course. After thought,
of course you did.
Vet bill said it like 5 times.
I will.
So,
go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, it certainly seems like the NBC Universal has experimented with that and been successful. So we may see certain other movies come out purely online if they're not a tentpole type movie that's going to attract a wide audience. That it may be more beneficial to target a smaller audience via just an online release.
Yeah. Dave, there's also a political question for Disney right now. It has stopped paying about half its workforce, particularly having to do with theme parks, as it continues, though, to say that it's going to preserve its dividend and it preserved certain executive compensation schemes, incentive schemes. How much pressure do you think Disney is going to be under, and will they cave to it to cut their dividend at a time when they are engaging in such mass layoffs?
Well, it does raise a question that the company will have to address. It's certainly the dividend is a relatively low payout historically of earnings that Disney has not historically been viewed as a yield stock or a dividend-oriented stock. But I think a lot's going to depend how long the parks have to remain closed and employees furloughed. At this point, the company has made no indication of cutting the dividend or eliminating it. But I think a lot's going to depend how quickly they can start ramping the parks back up and so forth.
David, very quickly here, what's the change in the CEO dynamics of Mr. Iger hanging around? Is he going to stay around with all this uproar, or is he going to still exit on schedule?
I think he'll still exit on schedule. Certainly there's been news of his involvement just after announcing that he was moving more into just a creative role. The news stories have indicated he is more involved once again, and I think that's probably an all hands on deck type of situation with the crisis they've been in, with large parts of the business being shut down. Bob Chapek had been running the Parks and Experiences segment, and so he may be kind of having to focus on how to manage that operation and has a lot of expertise on that front. So likely Iger is going to back on board as far as trying to manage the other parts of the operation through, it's a pretty unprecedented situation for the company.
Dave, appreciate your time this morning. I hope the team are doing well. Dave Hager there of Edward Jones on the Walt Disney Company as we wait for those numbers a little bit later after the closing bell. Some news coming out of Germany. The German finance minister weighing in. We'll find ways of doing what's needed for Europe. The court decision essentially backs the ECB purchase programme, though we'll examine the court decision, the ruling on the ECB very closely. Italian yields come in just a little bit. The euro stays weaker. Euro dollar down by about 0.5%. From New York, this is Bloomberg Surveillance, live on Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Futures point.
The trampoline that makes Dad feel like a kid again. The projector that turns film night into outdoor cinema night. The hot tub that transforms your garden into a spa retreat. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
If you want to do something important, work in adult social care.
I'm Georgia. I love social care because you never know what each day will bring. The thing that I would say to anybody that was thinking about a job in social care is go for it.
We are recruiting in your local area. We need you now, and they need you always. Care for others. Make a difference. Today. Search adult social care jobs now.
A half-price dream holiday. Wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free. Wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
We're up nicely here, 60 minutes away from the opening bell in New York City. You are listening to Bloomberg Surveillance. We are up 38, call it 39 points on the S&P 500, positive 1.36% on the S&P. A little bit of data coming out here in America. Let's get you up to speed. Here's Vinny, Dodgy Dice.
Hello, John. The government reporting the trade deficit in goods and services widening in March to $44.4 billion. The trade gap again widening, $44.4 billion. Trade, a wild card. It's been hit by a triple whammy. The virus disrupting global trade, the oil price war, and let's not forget tariffs. Again, the trade deficit widening in March, $44.4 billion. I'm Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio. Let's go back to New York.
Vinny, great to catch up with you. As always, the latest data in America coming up a little bit later this morning, 9:45 Eastern. The market services PMI, the composite PMI as well as a final read for the month of April. And the ISM non-manufacturing index coming out for the month of April as well. Your survey, 38.0, down from a previous read of 52.5.
We're getting used to those numbers, to say the least, and we do that on a Tuesday, folks. We welcome you coast to coast as we look at the weekly prospects of Wednesday, ADP, Thursday, another horrific jobless claims, and then on to the Friday report. With us, Michael Ferroli of J.P. Morgan. Michael, all of us and you and Bruce Kasman and your team have to get to the Friday report. I believe you are published at 15% unemployment rate. How does that tilt? Give us a little bit of understanding of the band that you have around your good statistical guesses.
Yeah, so it's obviously a lot wider than usual, and I think one very important consideration here is that the labor force participation rate, which is the share of the over 16 population that's looking for a job or has a job, that could come down quite a bit, which would actually make the unemployment rate look lower than it would otherwise. So I think in an absence of a drop in the participation rate, we could be seeing an unemployment rate closer to 20%. But again, even all those numbers, taken together, I think there is a huge amount of uncertainty. I think most of us have been using the weekly jobless claims numbers as our beacon in this fog. But even those numbers, I think, could be distorted by administrative backlogs, by a variety of conflating factors. I think the only thing we know is it's going to be a really terrible report. The other thing to keep in mind is that for the establishment survey, which survey gets us that non-farm payroll headline number, there may be some reporting issues there because generally non-responding firms, we impute the response of other firms for those non-responding firms. But a lot of firms that just basically shut down in April won't have anyone in the office to respond to the Labor Department when they do their monthly survey. So there's a lot of sources of distortion here. But I think it's safe to say it's going to be an epic number in terms of how bad it paints a picture of the labor market.
Michael, what are you saying to people who say, we know this number is going to be ugly, and for that reason we can move on and look through it? What do you say to them?
I would say slow down. I think it's first important to gauge the depth of the hole that we're going to be digging out of. And we're not even certain that we're going to have that, done with this labor market report, because there is some concern that, for instance, when the PPP funds, which are Paycheck Protection Program funds, which small businesses have to maintain their payrolls for 8 weeks, when those funds potentially run out starting later this month or on into June, we could see a second wave of layoffs. So we don't even yet know the depth of the hole we're digging out of, but I think it is important to know, how big that hole is. And then beyond that, the bigger question becomes, how fast we can return to normal in terms of the economic activity. Obviously, the bigger uncertainty is how fast it's safe to reopen things. But then even conditioned on that, there's a lot of uncertainty as to how businesses and households repair their balance sheets or maintain their balance sheets and are able to resume normal economic activity.
Just talking about the composition of businesses going forward, there's been a lot of focus on how small businesses have gotten disproportionately hit, with one government survey showing that 40% of smaller businesses in the United States expect to close down if the shutdowns last for 6 months. I'm just wondering how much you expect the small business world landscape to shrink in the wake of this consolidating power in the largest companies, and what that does in terms of salaries, in terms of productivity, based on what we've seen over the past few years.
Yeah, so I think at this stage it's hard to give you a firm number on what we think about that, or our estimate on that. But what I would say is that even prior to this event we're living through, there had been a trend toward increasing concentration of activity in the hands of a few large companies in each sector, and that seems like it's only going to intensify. And I think there was a lot of concern about what that concentration had meant. I think one of the implications was that it meant a decline in the labor share of total national income. So if this accelerates that trend, which seems almost certain, I think we may see a continued shrinkage of the share of national income going to labor, and I think that's one of potentially many implications of us moving activity into basically publicly traded companies, right? So before this episode, publicly traded companies accounted for 35% of employment. We often look at the stock market as some kind of reflection of the health of the economy. It's a reflection of a third of the economy. But going forward, it's perhaps reflecting a greater share of the economy.
Michael Feroli, thank you so much. Really look forward to the updates through the week and, of course, your weekly prospects out this weekend. Dr. Feroli with J.P. Morgan is, well, John, I think we really need to frame out this labor economy right now and look at the scope and scale. And as Dr. Feroli said, it's not just an easy arithmetic calculation. There's two surveys, and there's enough moving parts, which we all study in Econ 101, that it's a huge mystery on any given statistic what we're going to see and then how it will adjust months out at this historic moment.
Well, Michael touched on something really, really important, and that's processing numbers this large, both from the investor's perspective and actually physically processing them to crunch the data and come out with a number. And we saw in the first few weeks of the lockdown, and Lisa and I were talking about this quite a lot, how difficult it was to get initial jobless claims processed, and that maybe we were topping out in and around 5 or 6 million. So I think for many people, they've seen the claims numbers, they've added them up, and they've gotten used to these massive numbers and expect something quite dreadful this coming Friday. I think to Michael's point, it could be a whole lot worse because of those processing issues, that maybe what we've seen so far, yes, was bad, but didn't quite capture how bad things really were.
Lisa, can I point out, I think, help me with the math, 20% means 1 in 5 workers are unemployed?
Yeah, at least, because there's also the underemployed and the people who aren't even in the labor rolls. Wow. I will say that Michael touched on another point that I thought was really important, and that is that the PPP funds that are intended to pay people, to keep people on the payroll, those run out in 8 weeks. So if this continues, or if they don't get a revamp in business, those people are also on the unemployment rolls. So I have to wonder how much of a lag effect this has, too. I think that's a very difficult thing to sort of game out right now.
Well, that's the point. Down in Washington, they're going to need more money. They're going to need another aid package. I've been really encouraged over the last 2 months how well Democrats and Republicans have worked together to actually get these bills over the line. We're talking huge sums of money in really, really short amount of time. I do wonder, though, as we start to go forward, as we start to reopen, the willingness to do the same again. Because the sequencing of policy is really important. In the lockdown, you need one set of policies from Washington. As you reopen, we need another set, and they need to be calibrated slightly differently to account for that.
Yeah, I would argue, though, that just throwing more money at this isn't going to necessarily solve it. I mean, there's a question of whether some of these businesses can exist, what the new normal is, how long that's going to continue. And I think that this conversation is going to be a lot more difficult since the programs cannot be as clear-cut as they were initially. And there's going to be a lot more scrutiny exactly as to where the money actually went.
The president picking up on the reopening, he said oil prices are moving up nicely as demand begins again. We're up 13% on WTI, till $23 a barrel.
I've been watching all morning. We haven't hit 30 on Brent. I got to admit, to the president's point, a 30 print on global floating Brent crude is a comforting number after what we've been through.
If we can reopen, even gradually, if we can bring some kind of demand back into the oil picture again, I think that's going to take some pressure off that storage capacity story that we breached a week or so ago. We need to reopen, though. Let's get it going. Let's get things moving, and let's see more and more of it, and hope we don't see the downside risk, the ultimate downside risk materializing, which is a second wave of infections and another shutdown, because I know that is something a lot of people worry about. In your market right now, equity futures are positive 36. We're at 1.27% on the S&P 500. We can get you some news, some headlines worldwide. We can do that with Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, John. Lisa, Tom, President Trump is heading out west today. It's his first major trip in months as he pushes states to roll back social distancing restrictions. President Trump travels to Phoenix to tour a Honeywell plant that employs 500 people to manufacture N95 masks. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker urged people in his state to adhere to the stay-at-home mandates in place despite the warmer weather that's ahead. Pritzker also says most people are adhering to the mandates, but for those who are not adhering to them consistently, there will be consequences.
We're asking them to disperse. I mean, that's the most important thing. We just don't want people getting sick. It's not an intention that people will go to jail. I will say, however, that if people are persistently defiant, they can be put in jail.
California Governor Gavin Newsom says the state is ready to slowly begin to open up. Newsom says some retailers could reopen as soon as Friday. However, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti warned that reopening the city to business will not be easy.
It's going to be tough for a while. This is hard. This hurts. But this is our new normal.
Several FedEx workers at the company's Newark, New Jersey air hub have died due to complications of the coronavirus, a sign of the toll that the outbreak has taken on frontline delivery workers. A Senate panel is set to consider Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe's nomination to be Director of National Intelligence. Ratcliffe was unexpectedly re-nominated by President Trump in February after his name was withdrawn from the post last summer. The August withdrawal came after bipartisan Senate criticism that Ratcliffe was unqualified to oversee 17 U.S. spy agencies. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Quick shout out to the South Side. The guys putting together some fantastic research over the last couple of months. I think it's been absolutely brilliant. Wall Street, Europe, Asia, and beyond. Deutsche Bank, Tom, have done this brilliant job of putting together some of the commentary from the C-suite. Just little quotes, little snippets to help you understand how the C-suite is saying things. And I think it's been really interesting. The C-suite, the CEOs, CFOs at the big multinationals are trying to maintain some optionality, to remain nimble. When they're cutting spending, it's discretionary spending. They're not looking at big layoffs yet. They want to be able to respond just in case demand picks up quickly. And if it doesn't, exactly. And I think that's really important. This came from Texas Instruments CEO, who said the plan is to ensure that we have the highest degree of optionality. And I think a lot of multinationals are trying to calibrate policy plans in the same way, so that if we come out of this and things are sluggish, they can respond. If things pick up, they're not behind.
Yeah, we'll have to see it. Again, it goes down to this new word, furlough. I mean, it's been out there forever, but never like it is right now. And you wonder on the Friday statistics, what portion of that, you wonder if labor will break out furlough versus jobless. I mean, it's an important concept.
Counting you down to a brutal payrolls report this coming Friday. Full coverage right here on Bloomberg Radio and, of course, on Bloomberg TV. In your market right now, around about 47 minutes away from the opening bell in New York City. Equity futures with a lift of 38 on the S&P. We're positive 1.35%. From New York, we're live on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Elon Musk is putting 2 of his California homes on the market after vowing to get rid of most of his possessions. What's behind the move?
Well, Elon Musk stands to get more than $700 million in stock options any day now based on his compensation package that Tesla's board approved in 2018.
And Bloomberg's Dana Hull says it could be all about appearances.
So there's some speculation that, you know, in the middle of a pandemic, getting this big options award, the optics of that might not be super great, and that he's trying to sort of make it the point that he's not materialistic. He's not, you know, he doesn't care about possessions, and you know, these listings seem to make it sound like he is sort of serious about maybe downsizing.
Musk is asking a combined $39.5 million for the Bel Air properties, including one that was previously owned by the late Gene Wilder. He bought the home 7 or 8 years ago for about $24 million, still owns 3 others there. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Connecting decision makers to a...
Get the latest breaking news alerts and listening suggestions for new stations and podcasts. Let TuneIn keep you in the loop with push notifications. Just go to your device's settings and allow push notifications from TuneIn to get live alerts and recommendations on the audio you want to know about.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. S&P futures up 36 points this morning. Dow futures up 300. NASDAQ futures up 119. The 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds. Yield 0.66%. Yield on the 2-year 0.18%. And NYMEX crude oil is up more than 13%, up $2.73 at $23.11 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. Lisa Bramowitz and Tom Keene. I've really been looking forward to this because this is a small little book that is a true bestseller. It is rare that you see a policy book fly off the Amazon shelves, but that's what economic dignity is, and it's what it's doing for Gene Sperling. Gene, I want to cut to the chase, and of course I do want to point out Gene's former employment with Bloomberg, but more importantly his employment, as Lisa mentioned, with President Clinton and then President Obama. Gene, I know that every progressive liberal Democrat is going to read this and they're going to say it's great. I want you to talk about the disaffected independent or the disaffected Republican that Joe Biden has to convince to vote for him. What should they get out of economic dignity?
I think what they should get is that they understand that there should be a dignity compact in our country. People expect that everyone's going to do their part, that they're going to try to carry their share of the load. But what we see at this moment, Tom, is we see a moment more clear than we've really had in our lifetimes, where we see the dignity and value of all work. We are looking at farm workers and delivery workers and nursing assistants who are literally saving our lives and are just asking, can they be treated not just with applause but with actual economic dignity? And that doesn't mean, that's not about, some big socialist endeavor. That's about, should you get paid a dignity wage you can raise your family? Should everybody be able to take time off if their parent is dying or there is a newborn child, or to care for themselves? These are basic things, and we're feeling the dissonance, Tom. We're feeling the dissonance of saying that these workers workers like farm workers, workers like nursing assistant, home aides. We realize they're helping to save our lives, and we have to ask, is it right that they can't care for their own families? I think I have three pillars I talk about in economic dignity.
But before we get into the pillars, though, I think that we want to talk about another dissonance that's very, very present in our minds, and that's what we're going to be getting on Friday with that jobs report, which will likely be the worst in history. There's the basic need that you speak of, the basic needs, but then there's the also basic need for a salary at all or any wages whatsoever. How do we preserve economic dignity at a time when 1 in 5 Americans, probably more than that, don't have a job?
Right. Look, I think when we're looking at the different things to get through this period, which is far different, I really think, than almost any recession that we've ever dealt with. This is a freezing of the economy. It's a shutting down of a lot of the economy. And people realize that people are without jobs at no fault of their own. This is a result of this pandemic. And so I think the two most important things is to try to make people whole in the sense of ensuring that they've got that paycheck while this is going on that allows them to pay the rent, not lose their home, make the car payment, put food on the table, be there for their children and their family. And so I think that I would say the most important is again on making people whole. There's two ways being proposed to do it. One is that you have an unemployment check that tries to be as close as possible to 100% of your paycheck till we get past this period of 20-25% employment. Or some people are suggesting, as they do in Europe, that you essentially pay that unemployment through the employer, keep people connected to the job and their health care. But I will say that we're going to also have to do more to make sure people can keep their health care, because if so many people are losing their job, you're going to see more people falling off health care. I think all of these are the most central things to do through what could be a very long job recession.
If you're just joining us, Economic Dignity, Gene Sperling. It's a controversial book across the political spectrum of this nation. Gene, I mentioned Vice President Biden. He's going to have to go out there and get the popular vote, get the electoral vote and that. I want you to address the theory of your book and the Gene Sperling Pitbull Terrier pragmatic liberalism that you are with, say, Connor Lamb outside Pittsburgh. You have mainstream, middle-of-the-road conservative Democrats running from progressive democratic theory. How do they fold economic dignity into their congressional districts that are so contentious?
I don't think it's hard at all. I mean, I'll give you an example of why. You talk about independent voters. A higher minimum wage has always been popular with many of the independent voters. Why? Because they understand that if a person is working hard, that they should be able to raise their family with a degree of dignity. And all I suggest in the book is that our fundamental guiding North Star shouldn't just be, some GDP metric, but whether you can care for your family and actually not just put food at the table, but be at the table, be there, whether you have the ability to pursue your purpose and potential, and whether you can work free from domination and humiliation. And I think I think you look across this country at the people now being ordered to go work and back to meat processing plants. Many of them will be Democrats, they'll be Republicans, but what are they going to believe? They're going to believe in the fundamental dignity of work, that they're out there doing the best they can for their family, and that to have a basic floor of economic dignity, of health security, is not to ask for a socialist regime. It's to, I think, fulfill the vision that you heard that Teddy Roosevelt talked about in 1912 when he talked about every job should allow a person to be able to raise their family with a degree of economic security.
Gene, I want to congratulate you. It's rare, folks, to see a book have the impact of economic dignity. It's truly stunning sales off of Amazon. Look for that. Gene Sperling, of course, working with Presidents Clinton and Obama. It is a controversial, thought-provoking effort, economic dignity. Gene, thank you so much. Lisa, just extraordinary the impact of this book as we go into the election season.
Well, and honestly, it's an incredibly important topic because as people lose their jobs, there's a big concern about mental health issues as people are dealing with what they're doing without an income and without that dignity of a job. Also, you have to wonder what the new jobs will look like and what kinds of preservations they have of wage gains, as you've talked about, Tom, at a time when bankruptcy rates are surging.
First of all, I don't have an opinion on this because we've got a rule at Bloomberg Surveillance. We don't do that. But I would point out, Lisa, that given the mother of all exogenous shocks that we have with this pandemic, it will be a huge debate within the United States. We'll see on that. Gene Sperling with Economic Dignity, a book for liberals and conservatives. Stay with us.
The true value of your custodial relationship.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Let's talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be. The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days. It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. We welcome all of you. Good morning, Washington, Boston, New York, Bloomberg 1130, and across the nation, Sirius XM, Channel 119. Good morning to you. Early good morning to San Francisco, and of course to all of you listening at home. It has been extraordinary. The finance, the investment, the politics, and of course the economics as we drive to Friday's jobs report. First, let me tell you about our support. Bloomberg Surveillance, always brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Get breaking tax, legislative, and business insight for financial firms. Cohn Resnick is ready to help. Visit their coronavirus resource center today, cohnresnick.com/COVID-19. Paul, we talked about Disney earlier. I'm sorry you missed that. But, there's a lot of different stories out there. I actually looked at the makeup of the NASDAQ 100 this morning. It's stunning, Paul, the focus on three stocks. It's just jaw-dropping to see.
It really is. We talked about it really over the years, how it's become, whether it's FANG or FANG Plus or whatever you want to call it, but it's even become more and more focused on some of those big names, the Amazons of the world, the Apples, and so on. And so the leadership in the marketplace has become so concentrated that quoting the indices isn't really reflective, perhaps, of what's really going on in the equity markets.
And of course, we see that today, folks, with a lift and a further lift to the market in the last hour. Futures up 35, Dow futures up 289. The VIX comes in a solid two big figures. We didn't get to 29 the last time we got enthusiastic. Right now, 35 down to 33.88. Excuse me, on the VIX. Yields, the 2 years flat, but we've got higher yields in the 10 and 30-year space, as they say. The great joy of the earnings season is that day where David Wilson gets a breather. That would be Breather Tuesday in honor of Cinco de Mayo. David Wilson has an easier day of it, and you begin with the pharmaceuticals, David.
Absolutely, Tom. Pfizer's up 2% in early trading. The drug maker began testing proposed coronavirus vaccines on U.S. patients. Pfizer's working with Germany's BioNTech, and the company started German trials last month. So this is an expansion of their efforts. Of course, there's a lot of competition in this area, notably Johnson & Johnson. You've got BioNTech trading here in the U.S. in the form of American depository receipts, and the ADRs are up about 4% in early trading. You're seeing energy stocks higher as crude oil rises for a fifth day in New York trading. That would set up the longest run of gains in 9 months. ExxonMobil's up 3%, Chevron up 3.5%, Occidental Petroleum up 5.5%, and Schlumberger up 4.5%. You've got Marathon Petroleum up 5.5% as well. The oil refiner said production will drop by about a third this quarter from the first quarter in response to lower demand. Marathon also will cut spending by 30% and suspend stock buybacks. Walgreens Boots Alliance is up 2.5%. AmerisourceBergen offered to buy the drugstore owner's wholesale unit, according to Reuters. The report cited unnamed people familiar with the matter. They said a deal may be valued at about $6 billion. Now, Walgreens is the biggest shareholder in AmerisourceBergen with a 28% stake. DuPont's up 2%. The chemical company's first quarter adjusted earnings and revenue fell less than analysts expected in a Bloomberg survey. DuPont benefited from greater demand for personal protective equipment, otherwise known as PPEs. Alaska Air Group up 5.5%. The carrier posted a narrower first quarter loss than analysts expected, and it's one of 5 airline stocks in the S&P 500. The others are higher as well. American up 3.5%, Delta up 2.5%, Southwest up 1.5%, and United up 4%. Cisco, this is the food service company, ticker SYY, is up 4%. Fiscal third quarter earnings and revenue were lower than estimates. Nonetheless, Cisco said it's fired or furloughed about a third of its workers as part of an effort to save more than $500 million. and that seems to be lifting the shares here.
David, do you think that they get boxes from Cisco CISCO, like they're sitting there in the factory and instead of getting 12 pounds of pasta, they're getting a router in?
Oh, who knows? They probably need the router to help run their business anyway, so they figure out what to do with it, I suppose. In any case, moving on. We have a deal to talk about. Portola Pharmaceuticals. The shares have more than doubled in early trading. They're up 131% last I checked. The developer of treatments for blood disorders agreed to a takeover by Alexion Pharmaceuticals. The all-cash deal is valued at $1.4 billion. You've got Alexion shares down about 4%. L Brands lower by 3%. The retailer scrapped the deal to sell a majority stake in lingerie unit Victoria's Secret to the private equity firm Sycamore Partners. You've got Norwegian Cruise Line down 9%. The company's annual report for last year questioned its ability to continue as a going concern. And Hertz Global Holdings down 16%. The rental car service reached a deal with lenders that buys time to work out a debt restructuring. Hertz missed payments due last week.
David, I thought you were going to mention it. You and I, we see each other at Gold's Gym 3 times a week. And they had to file,
I don't go to the gym. I just go out walking or running. That's enough.
David Wilson, thank you so much. Paul, the charm of this Boeing 747 is between the passengers and the fancy part of the plane. You hit a little button and a little screen goes up and down. We are going to go so far beyond that.
We are. I mean, it's just, you think about it, Tom. You think about the essential workers out there. We think about the doctors and the nurses, but it's also on the transportation front. You think about it, Tom. The buses, the subways, the trains. They're still running. Maybe kind of a restricted schedule, but they're still out there. And the bus drivers, for example, are really on the front lines here to get a sense of kind of what's happening on the front lines of transportation. We're really fortunate to have Bloomberg government transportation reporter Courtney Rosen joining us. So, Courtney, give us a sense here. We think about some of the inequities of this virus, how it's impacting different communities. You think about the African American community. You think about some of the frontline workers. What are some of your reporting show that's really happening on the front lines?
Hi, good morning, and thanks for having me. I would say, so what we know about the demographics of bus drivers to begin with, virus separate, we know about 30% of them are black, about 14% are Hispanic, and about 15% of them are older than 65. So we all know that those are populations that have been pretty hard hit by the virus to begin with. And then you add in the fact that a lot of these people are in contact with others every day on the job, and that's just the nature of their job. They can't necessarily separate. So you've got high-risk people then being exposed to the disease every day, and that can have some pretty horrible
consequences. Courtney, brilliant. They're in the trenches. Do masks work? I mean, basically, they're going to throw in a mask and plastic gloves, and they're out there. You're 100% correct. They're incredibly exposed. Is there any reporting yet that masks and plastic gloves help?
So it's kind of conflicted. We're hearing from, when I talk to transit systems across the country, that's what they're doing. They're providing masks to their workers and other sanitary stuff like wipes and gloves. But the Federal Transit Administration and then the CDC, who's advising us on all this health-related stuff, have said masks. So that's what they're saying. I can't say at this point whether that's effective or not.
Yeah, fair.
But, yeah, it's definitely what they're doing at this point. There's also stuff that they've done that is, like, for example, rope off sections of the bus where people can't sit so that they social distance, or put up plastic plexiglass around the drivers so that there's more of a barrier there, or have people board at the rear of the bus. So there's other structural things they're doing outside of masks and gloves and that kind of stuff.
So, Courtney, are typically transit bus work? I mean, they're unionized, right? So, what do the unions typically say here as it relates to worker safety within the pandemic?
Yeah, so one of the most interesting union leaders I talked to was in Miami-Dade County in Florida. They're actually suing their employer for failing to provide protection, which is the first lawsuit I've heard of on this front. And they've been pretty vocal of, our workers are frontline. They're interacting with people every day. They need protection. And I spoke with the head of the transportation authority in that area of the country, and she was talking to me about giving them all masks every day, but that there's a shortage, and they can't necessarily be giving new masks every month. So, yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act in the unions and the employers.
Courtney, one last question. What's economy look like in airlines?
What's the economy look like?
No, what's economy section? What's the back of the airplane going to look like?
The back of the airplane. I couldn't tell you. I will say that this coming week on Wednesday, I cover Congress and transportation, and we're going to have the head of a very big airline association testify tomorrow on Capitol Hill, and so perhaps that's something he'll talk about. But yeah, I can't necessarily say what economy is going to look like at this point.
Okay, Courtney, thank you so much. Courtney Rosen, greatly appreciated. Bloomberg Government there on the realities we're going to all face. Paul, we make jokes about it, but there's nothing funny. I mean, these people are in the front line.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, every day you think about on the transportation, it's an essential service. So they, like some other essential workers, have to be there. And we tip our hats, obviously.
With the news on this Tuesday in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. Chinese state media unleashed a torrent of criticism against Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, calling him evil and a liar as Beijing sought to push back against the U.S.'s virus allegations. State media published a series of commentaries lashing out at Pompeo after he said there was enormous evidence that the coronavirus outbreak sprung from a high-security lab in the Chinese city of Wuhan. The Senate is back in Washington to consider nominations. Maine Independent Senator Angus King says he wishes it was for different reasons.
I don't mind coming back. I came down yesterday. I'm glad to be here. But when people in Maine were talking to me, they said, now, when you go back, let's work on unemployment. Let's work on aid to the farmers. Let's work on the PPP or help for the lobstermen. Nobody said, Angus, we want you to go down there and confirm that unqualified judge for a lifetime appointment. I mean, it's ridiculous.
President Donald Trump's pick to be Director of National Intelligence, Texas GOP Representative John Ratcliffe, is likely to face pointed questions today in the Senate over his ties to the president and questions about his resume and qualifications. Ratcliffe is appearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee after he was selected by the president a second time to be the nation's spy chief. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says the city will distribute 7.5 million free face masks to residents in a bid to further prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated this morning. Paul, a quiet day in earnings. We were talking about Disney earlier, and I guess they're going to launch out here. What are your thoughts on Disney, Paul? That's your wheelhouse, as they say.
As they say, yeah, Tom, this is going to be a brutal quarter for them, and I think a series of quarters coming up here. Their businesses are really exposed to this. You think about the theme parks. They're shut globally. You think about the movie business. Nobody's going to movies. The movie theaters are closed.
Yeah.
And you think about their cable networks. Advertisers are pulling back. So all their businesses are exposed. The only thing that they really have going for them is that extraordinary brand of Disney. And on the other side of this, you think they're going to be okay. So I think that's kind of where the market is, Tom. But they're kind of bracing for some really tough numbers coming out of the company. They furloughed a lot of workers, and they're really hunkering down here. They're drawing down the revolver, so they're really hunkering down here. So we'll see here. After the close, Tom, we're looking for those numbers from Disney and the commentary from management. We'll have all the latest for you. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Influential conversations from Bloom.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
We're all having to get used to the new normal, and at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Phishing emails are designed to trick you into giving away personal details. Messages might be about travel refunds, delivery tracking, or supermarket vouchers. Remember, never click on links or attachments in emails received out of the blue.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are climbing this morning alongside European shares, with sentiment lifted as more economies move toward easing their coronavirus lockdowns. Oil headed for its longest winning streak in 9 months. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 36 points, Dow futures up 298, NASDAQ futures up 112. The DAX in Germany is up 1.8%. 10-year Treasury down 9/32, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up 14%, up $2.88 at $23.27 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.6%, or $9.70 at $17.0340 an ounce. The euro 1.0862 against the dollar, British pound 1.2462, and the yen 106.63. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. This has been beneath the radar, but it is important. We spoke with Michelle Patch this morning. Our Francine Lacroix did. Michelle is in the heart of nursing at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I should mention that Michael Bloomberg, the founder of Bloomberg LP, on this radio and TV platform, as well as a philanthropist to his Johns Hopkins University. And the topic was exceptionally important, and that is this virus appears to be causing damaging blood clots.
The human body, actually, we have an incredible ability to try and heal ourselves. So, for instance, when you have an injury to a blood vessel, say you're cutting tomatoes and you inadvertently slip and you cut your finger, the blood vessels around that try to contract and stop losing blood, and then you have several different cells and proteins that will respond to that area and quickly try to build a clot or turn that liquid blood into solid so that you're not losing additional blood. So usually this would be helpful and protective for us. What we're seeing, though, in various types of severe illness, including some of our patients with COVID-19, is there's the potential for this system to really function in an overdrive setting. We clearly, as you mentioned, more study is needed, and this is complex, and we're learning more and more every day. But it's possible that body's immune response, including that cytokine storm and trying so desperately to heal, may be associated with this increased clotting. Additionally, when you think about very ill individuals who are immobile, they're on, in a hospital bed, on a ventilator, and are not able to move themselves, you can get pooling of the blood that can develop clots. And those clots have the risk of breaking off and floating to different areas of the body, such as the lungs, and you can get problems with your body's able to use oxygen, and we're also, unfortunately, in some cases, seeing clots to the brain, leading to stroke.
Michelle?
Oh, sure. So I think if you had asked us a few months ago, we may not have said that we anticipate as nurses being as ubiquitous as we are in all of the efforts for this. But, for instance, we have many of our nurses who are functioning within incident command centers across Hopkins and Hopkins affiliates in order to coordinate and facilitate our combined efforts. And that is around the logistics, the operations, how do we get the supplies we need, how do we get them to the front line as quickly as possible and to the right areas, as well as nurses being there as decision makers and helping the greater team to decide when should we actually launch certain types of negative pressure units or biomode units that help to contain the virus and provide the best care for all of our patients, COVID and non-COVID alike. So it really has been a unique experience for many of us, but one that I think we are very prepared to be working so closely with our colleagues to help fight.
Michelle Patch, the Johns Hopkins University, in conversation with Francine Lacroix. Paul, through the morning, it's been better equity markets, and I guess across all asset classes, it's about a better tone on battling this pandemic and trying to avoid all the economic gloom that's out there. And of course, Paul, you told me, I think Brent crude was trading at negative $40 a barrel or whatever. And you told me, Tom, take a barrel, put it in the living room,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's we've had a real lift here to oil here. We got Brent up another $2.60 a barrel to $29.80.
Yeah.
Up about 10% there, Tom. And I think it's we had those production curbs coming out of OPEC and OPEC plus, Saudi Arabia and Russia cutting about 10 million barrels a day of production.
Yeah.
It's about 10% of the global daily production, so meaningful. But when you look at the demand, I think the market was just a little uncertain as to whether that was enough.
But it's like buying strawberries for $1.99 or whatever they used to cost in our youth. I mean, there's a big difference between Brent crude at $29 a barrel and the big 30. I mean, 30 is you almost say to yourself, oh, normal. I'm not saying it's normal. It's not for me to judge it's normal, but 30 is a huge benchmark here for floating global Brent crude to get back to.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I mean, that's certainly within the range of a lot of when you talk to oil strategists and oil investors. Something with in the $30 to $50 to $60 range is something that is more normalized level, and you can certainly budget off of numbers starting with a 3 in front. So, the question is here, kind of as we all have been stating for some time, Tom, is how long will this virus impact the global economy? To what degree? And we're going to see a huge Q2 GDP contraction here. The question is, how does the global economy kind of recover in Qs 3 and 4, of course, into 2021? And that'll be obviously the primary driver for many commodities, including crude.
I looked at the close yesterday, Paul. Off the bottom, the SPX is up 29%.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So here, I think, as we start to think about reopening economies, Tom, we see that in Europe a little bit. We see that obviously in China, and we're starting to see a little bit across the U.S. And there's lots of different strategies for reopening the economies. But, the ability to do that successfully will obviously have a huge impact on global GDP numbers and then the commodities underlying.
Well, let's get over here and look at the data as we can. We could do that on a Bloomberg. I'm working, folks, right now off the Bloomberg Terminal iPhone app. All I can say is it's worth getting the terminal just for the iPhone app. It's that good. Paul, I may never come into the office again.
And we may never see it. Exactly.
Futures up 37. Dow futures up 319. The VIX 34.03.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Get your cook on with Asda. Pick up a 7-pack of Growers Selection bananas for just £1 and 125 grams of Growers Selection blueberries. Was £1.19, now just £1. So you can get groovy with your smoothies. We've got loads more low prices across the store. Asda. Selected stores subject to availability.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be wary of people you've met online who claim to be stranded abroad and urgently need money. Always take time to think before you act, and if you think you're the victim of fraud, then let your bank know right away.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius
and Paul Sweeney, and the S&P 500 is higher at the open. It's up 1% or 28 points at 2871. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.9% or 223 points at 23,971. And the Nasdaq is up 1.1% or 92 points at 8804. 10-year Treasury down 9/32, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up 14.5%, up $3 at $23.38 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.25% or $4.50 at 17.0880 an ounce. The euro 1.0865 against the dollar. The yen is at 106.61. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. I just want to give a massive shout out. Stephen Stanley at Amherst Pierpont, like so many of our guests, writes up instant research, and they all do a great job at it. Stanley is uncommonly clear and on the immensely complex math of our trade. And I'm sorry, President Trump, I know listens often. It's a lot more complicated than just one thrust or one idea. And just, folks, two nuances of the trade deficit report just reported. A huge part of import decline was Apple cell phone imports disappeared. And the other one, looking back, is what was increased in imports, and that was gold. Gold went through the moon in terms of the amount of gold coming into this nation. We thank Steve Stanley for that wisdom. Right now, Barry Ritholtz and Paul, Barry, Paul's got a laundry list of like 6 things to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about one thing, Barry. We need a Ritholtz clinic on this. Right now, the gloom's out there. We're going to be range bound. We're never going to go up, which means I should take a blue chip stock and write calls against it, bringing in premium to give me a better dividend return. Barry, that seems like the all-time great Ritholtz free lunch.
Yeah, the problem with that strategy is it works great right up until the moment when it stops. But the danger is only to both the downside and the upside. Other than that, it's fantastic. And I could give you more details. The reason you have danger to the downside is if we see a revisit of the lows, if we drop, as most of the people on the technical side of the street are expecting, the technicians are looking for a retest of the March lows. Well, you know, the 1.5–2% in premium you generate by writing covered calls on a monthly basis is not going to cover a 30 or a 40% fall. So that's your downside risk. Your upside risk is if you picked a good stock, a good company, and it goes higher, well, eventually it gets called away. And again, 0.5%, 1%, 2% isn't going to make up for a stock that's run up 20, 30%. So unless you could guarantee me we're range bound for 6 months, a year, 5 years, you have upside risk and downside risk. Not my favorite position to be in.
Okay, there's your financial planning and primer for the day from Barry Ritholtz. Paul, what do you have?
So, Barry, I mean, do you think we are, in fact, range bound here? I mean, on the one hand, we're just going to have, it seems like month after month, maybe quarter after quarter, you know, in the near future, some just really, really tough economic data points offset with the fact that we've got a very accommodative, federal fiscal policy, stimulus, all those things out there kind of supporting the market. Does that just suggest a range-bound type of market?
Not necessarily. Look, you have to step back and look at the really big picture. The really big picture is forget recession. By all the metrics that we've seen, this is a depression. Unemployment is somewhere between 20 and 30%. GDP, remember, we only had a month or almost a month of lockdown in Q1. The actual decrease in GDP is probably somewhere between 30% and 40% on the negative side. If this was not an externality, if this was how the economy had fallen apart on its own, there would be some serious panic. We would have incredible structural issues. Instead, this is an externality, and once we can get past that, and I can't tell you if that's 6 months or 12 months or 24 months, but once we know that there's a reliable treatment, once we know that there's some form of a viable vaccine, and historically 18 months is good. Dr. Fauci is now saying maybe it's faster than that. I think the rally we've seen the market engaging in is somewhat looking past the next 12 months to the other side. Might be too optimistic, maybe not, but that's what's a big source of what's driving what's happening here. That plus $5, $6, $7 trillion in stimulus. Hey, give me $5 trillion and I'll throw you a hell of a party.
Barry, I want to go large cap, small cap now. We have seen a really interesting difference of opinion, folks, among our esteemed guests about small cap. The shift will occur. Value, the shift will occur. And others that say no. I mean, Barry, what you and I know is you line up 10 or 15 or 20 years of performance and growth kills it until value comes in and has a mother of all 12 or 24 months. I mean, is that cycle broken?
Well, here's the thing that's different. I hate when people say it's different this time when they don't understand what that phrase means. And what it really means is human nature is immutable and unchanging. That's what's not different. What is different this time is the era of ultra-low rates and no inflation. My colleague Ben Carlson did a study, and he found that the value premium only works during periods of inflation. And when there's no inflation, or in our case, disinflation or perhaps even deflation, well, the value premium doesn't really exist. And so you're left with growth as your next best alternative. The small cap, big cap issue is sort of fascinating because, look, you take the 5 biggest companies in the S&P, they're 20% of the index. I don't recall that happening anytime recently, and we are sort of turning into a winner-take-all market. It was Michael Jordan and everybody else in the NBA, and now it's the big FANG stocks. It's Apple, Amazon.
Okay, so what do our listeners do? I mean, you're sitting down. I mean, I know your minimum account is $10 million, but Barry, you're sitting down with mere mortals, and it's a winner-take-all thesis. It's a winner-take-all digital world. What do we do?
So for long-term investors, we're not big fans of single company stock risk. Look how many times we've seen Apple and Amazon fall 40, 50, 60% in its history. I'm pretty confident that that will happen once again at some point in the future. I just can't tell you when. So rather than pick which of those 5, if you want something a little more aggressive than the S&P 500, you go back out and you buy the NASDAQ 100, you buy the Qs. But you're not doing this as a market timing exercise. You're doing this on the next dip down 10, 20, 30% to put away for 5%, for 5 years or 10 years. If you want to nibble here, you can, but I much prefer being more aggressive on a down move than I am on a, March and April were both back-to-back worst month, best month. That's a sort of unusual situation, and it means that it's really challenging to figure out what the next month or two looks like. So I'm not convinced we're going to be in a trading range. I think we're going to see a lot more wild swings. You don't get radical moves like that. Those are both top 20 moves throughout market history. March was one of the worst, top 20 worst months, and April was one of the best months. So, a little stability would be nice. I don't think we get that till we're have a little more clarity on a treatment and a vaccine for the coronavirus.
How about oil? Tom's got a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude sitting in his foyer of the townhouse. What are you doing with oil here and energy, Barry?
So tell me when we're going to start air travel and driving the way we were back in January and February, and that's the answer to the oil question. Of all the industries out there, air travel consumes a lot of energy, and it's the one that Warren Buffett just said, I'm done. I've had enough. I was the largest holder of...
Okay, Barry, I don't mean to cut you off, but what we're going to do is go to Michael Barr in the news. I want to come back and talk about Mr. Buffett. Will you stay around, Barry, to come back and talk about Mr. Buffett? Let's do that. Barry Ritholtz with us. Of course, masters of business. You want a podcast? Well, podcasts are too short. They're too short. Ritholtz sometimes has like 4-hour conversations with people on a hot sauce or whatever. It's really worthwhile listening to Barry Ritholtz, masters of business. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. A major U.S. drug company is starting trials of an experimental coronavirus vaccine. Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
Pfizer, working with a German firm, hopes its vaccine is ready for emergency use by fall. The aim is for the trials on American patients to shave years off the typical time it takes to develop a new inoculation. Pfizer CEO says the time frame it took to move from preclinical studies to human testing is extraordinary. Drug makers have been working with regulators to compress development times, but given what's happened with other past vaccines, there is a risk the new inoculation could actually make trial patients more susceptible to severe illness. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
The University of Washington coronavirus model, often cited by the White House, revised its projections to nearly 135,000 COVID-19 related deaths in America. White House coronavirus task force member Dr. Anthony Fauci says models that change numbers can confuse people, but the principles behind them don't change.
When you have a lot of virus activity, and you know that you're able to contain it to a certain degree by the mitigation, the physical separations, the kinds of things that we've been talking about, gateway, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and you start to leapfrog over some of these, you're inviting rebound.
Dr. Fauci is also shooting down theories that the coronavirus was man-made. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases director tells National Geographic the virus was in the wild to begin with. President Trump is scheduled to travel to Arizona today to visit a Honeywell facility manufacturing N95 masks. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. I want to point out Turkish lira. I mean, one of the EM idiosyncratic ideas out there is ever weaker through 7 to 7.07. Mexican peso, Paul, Mexican peso, Cinco de Mayo.
See?
Got to be stronger. It is. 23.84 on Mexican peso. The dollar churning here against big currencies. Dollar fractionally stronger as well. We're going to come back with Barry Ritholtz. Well, Paul, you know, I can't say enough about this call rate thing. And have you ever seen anybody like over any kind of duration add alpha with call rating?
You know, it's... it produces income, Tom, and if you think you've got a range bound market and you can't really figure out a way to make money on the long side, writing options is it's a strategy, but whether you're writing calls or puts, it's a little bit of a way to try to trade what you think might be a trade bound market here.
I think the range is sometimes smaller on the range than what it is Barry nicely laid out the ups and downs, the options, if you will, if you go up big on a stock or down big on a stock. Well, let me do a data check here, folks. I'm going to do a complete data check. I'm going to pretend I'm Karen Moscow. We can do that here. Bloomberg surveillance up 312. 24,061 on the Dow. SPX up 38. James Bevan, thank you so much for joining us today. He says 2880 is fair valued. The VIX 33.56 in 2.41 big figures. Watching the dollar up just a little bit here. DXY as well. Don't miss this. Barry Ritholtz on Mr. Buffett. We'll do that next. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Rich Americans are taking advantage of a once-in-a-lifetime chance to transfer money to their children and grandchildren tax-free. It was already easier than ever to avoid the 40% levy on the biggest fortunes thanks to the 2017 Republican tax overhaul that doubled estate and gift tax exemptions to more than $23 million for married couples. But now with key interest rates set by the IRS at all-time lows, 0.8 in May from well above 2% for most of last year, the uber wealthy can loan their heirs or trusts millions with rates locked in for decades without denting that exemption. Online auctions of jewelry are doing well in the pandemic. To wit, a 1930s Cartier Tutti Frutti bracelet hammered at $1.34 million, making it the most expensive piece of jewelry ever sold at an online auction. According to a Sotheby's rep, collectors are bored at home and buying jewels as a sort of pick-me-up. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right. To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Global news 24 hours a day.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling. wherever good music lives.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus.